Got YouTube. I've got a better setup than I have been.
Oh, good.
I think. How's that look on the screen?
Let me make it full screen. Hold on. Oh, it looks good.
Yeah?
Yep.
Well, how about that? Am I getting better at setup? Let's not go too far. We haven't even started yet.
So, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Do you want me to stop sending you pictures?
Sending me pictures.
You know, the pictures that I send you when I'm like taking pictures of your work at different stages?
No, I like that. It's I mean, end of the day, if it's not a picture that I want, then it's just digital. I'd just delete it.
Yeah, okay, that's good. I don't want to send them to you if you don't want them, you know?
You know, I didn't get to today, and I was just with my boys the whole night, and then I had to set this up, as I didn't get to that thing that my mother wanted to send. She wanted to send out a notification to, the people who've been interested in classes, but maybe if you remind me before you go, that might help.
Okay. So remind you to send a notice to sure
Potential students. I mean, just people that have expressed interest in classes and former students and stuff.
Okay.
So I'm going to continue this with some glazes. Just big picture stuff. Right now I'm just oiling the surface. I doubt I'll get to the lace today. I'll probably do another layer of paint on this underneath the table. And lace can be a dedicated sitting. I don't even know if I'll get to the basket today. We'll see. But I'd like to build up. Go on.
Are you going to go for the shell then?
I'd really like to get to this one because it's the most complex. I'd like to get to this one too. If I got some of these stripes on here, that might be nice.
All right, I'm in for whatever you do.
I want to see what I can do about picture-in-picture on YouTube. Be nice to get the image up. I don't know how much time I want to spend on it though, because I want to get the painting.
Okay.
But anyway, terrible glare on setup. Can I zoom? I wonder what the settings are like. Pop out dashboard. That did not do good.
Are you talking about Zoom?
I'm talking. I said Zoom. I meant YouTube.
YouTube, right? Okay.
But there's like a terrible glare on the camera, and there wasn't before I put this medium down. Just oil down.
Yeah.
But now there's a terrible glare.
I'm gonna. You can see it.
It's on the screen.
Okay.
I don't want to make my painting difficult to paint on just for the sake of the video. I've made that mistake before. You create it would be less distorted for the camera, but it'd be, I'll make it worse for me to paint on, and I'll do a worse job. I don't know. I don't know what to do about it. Maybe if the camera were higher? Yeah. All right, that might be worth it. All right, hang tight. All this will have to get deleted out of the video. Nobody likes to hear this stuff. Well, at least I wouldn't. If I were me.
And you argue.
Sometimes. All right, yeah, that's much better. So, all of you on YouTube, hope that's better for you, and I'll adjust the angle to actually see. Yeah, that's much. It's still a little glare, but it's better than it was. Why is this not holding? That's better. Okay. I wish I could get the still life and the painting in the same shot, but the problem with putting it on the other side is that I'll end up bumping the camera too often. This tripod is convenient because it's really flexible, but it's very flimsy, so I can really, really easily knock it down. And there goes the camera. So one thing I can do to start, it's too red, is just a series of glazes, and I'm just going to be pretty reckless with it. I don't really worry about too much when I'm glazing, but the one thing that I do intentionally go for is too much. So if I decided I want it warmer and darker, I'm going to make it too dark and too warm. And that's what I'm doing now. So temporarily, it's going to look really red, and it's just temporary. This is going to end up having a lot of oil and streaks on it. So what I do to mitigate that is to put on way too much oil and just slap the paint on. I don't worry about if I'm within the lines. I don't worry about if I go into that shell or whether it's the right value or not, because I'm just going for the properties, not the actual end product. So this is an exaggeration. So now I take my paint rag and I get rid of that excess oil. I get rid of the streaks. I make the paint super thin, and wiping it back, if I didn't exaggerate, it would go right back to where it was. But the bonus is that I get to see the exaggeration, which I really like. Sometimes I think, okay, I scaled it back, but I liked it better when it was darker and richer. So I can decide to say, okay, that was nice, but maybe I want to push these cooler darks in here as a second glaze. And maybe I'll leave this one behind a little bit more and make that reflected light enhanced without making it bright. So these are all little quick decisions that I'm making that are really consequence free. I'm not worried about making a mistake right now. I could just wipe it right off and I'd be right back to where I started from. So I really can't make a mistake right now.
What's in that glaze?
Alizarin, burnt sienna, and some raw umber.
Okay.
Burnt umber would get me kind of close, but I kind of like that extra red that alizarin provides. And I usually don't carry both burnt and raw umber on my palette. It's just too redundant. I want to keep my palette fairly minimal, and I can make raw umber very much like burnt very, very easily. So I don't need it. So I prefer raw. I like the gray, and I have other transparent reds that I can make the brown redder if I wanted to. So there's really no need for me to have burnt umber. But some people like it on their palette. You know, you want to make a palette that really works for you, and for me, keeping it fairly minimal is nice. And I really I have a set palette that I really like, and it's almost like a keys on a piano. And I don't have to really look at where to grab that next pigment. I know exactly where it is through familiarity, like typing on a keyboard on a computer. It's just natural. I know my fingers just go right to where they're supposed to go on the keyboard. Well, same thing with my palette. The brush just goes right to where I want. If I want warm, dark, boom, I'm on my, here are my pure warms. They're fairly opaque except for alizarin, but then I've got my red, brown, and my gray. And, these are my earth tones, my tertiary colors. These are my pure warms. These are my pure cools. And that's, just there because it's bright, but it's pretty dead. It has no real color cast. It's very cold. It kills color. So that's the exception. Those, to my pure warms being on that side, because white is kind of like the anti-color on the palette, but that serves its purpose too, obviously. So that was one enhancement. I don't really have to switch my brush. I could just keep moving with the same one, because again, it's just, I'm not going for the ultimate value. I'm going for just the kind of setup. So with this shell, that's already pretty bright. And so I'm gonna gray it down. It's gonna be artificially too dark, but it's gonna give me that relative value that'll make it really easy to pop the highlights out of. So everything's going to shift equally. Again, I go for exaggerations at first, so this is going to be way too gray and way too dark at first. And I don't have to worry about the background. I don't have to worry about the basket. If I hit this little urchin shell, so what? And obviously, I'm going to paint back into it really brightly. But this sort of base of dark gray is going to provide darker middle tones for the lights to pop out of. So I'd rather do this first. There's some little drawing fixes to do, and there's definitely some enhancements to make beyond the term fixing. Fixing implies something that I made a mistake, and I really didn't. It was just base information. So maybe let's not call it a mistake, but or fix, but it definitely needs more than what I did on the previous sitting. That was just kind of like a sitting to make it go from very, simple drawing with umber to just a squint level pattern that I see when I squint. And so none of it was meant to be right. None of it was meant to be anything more than a guess. And I'm definitely going to be doing some drawing on it, but the glaze really isn't going to stop me from doing that. It's just going to give me a slightly darker gray to make my highlights pop. And so at first that looked terribly dark and gray, and that freaks people out when I do that kind of stuff. But I really like it as a start. Now the urchin shell is a little bit warmer and a little bit darker than this shell. So again, I'm just going to push my values. This is way too dark, way too warm, because those are the properties that I want on the finished product. I don't want all the little streaks from the hairs, and I don't really want all that oil to play with. I don't want it to get, soupy. Not early on. I can handle soupy. It's just, I want to do redraw with control, and the excess oil really isn't ideal for that. It's not prohibitive, but it's not ideal. So now that's darker, warmer. This is darker, grayer. This is darker, richer, brown, red, all with, really just slapping it on there, not really caring if it's exactly right or wrong. This I'm going to do the opposite on. These colors are too dark, too disparate, and too rich in color on purpose. I set it up that way, and I'm doing a half paste. So a half paste will remove color through haziness, and it'll kind of weaken it. It will it'll bring the contrast lower, more integrated, more together, and it'll just weaken all the color. So it'll do everything that I set it up to do, in that I grossly exaggerated envisioning what it's going to look like when I do this layer. So again, I want to exaggerate. I want to make it maybe a little bit extra cloudy, extra bright, extra integrated. And I didn't even exaggerate here. That's not enough. So I'm going to do another round to make it even more so. And right now, what I feel like is that all I would have to do is blend it with a blending brush instead of wiping it off, because I feel like if I wiped it off, it would be too much removal and it would go right back to being too rich and too colorful. So I'm going to take a different course on this. If I didn't exaggerate enough on these, maybe that would be the right solution. But I didn't exaggerate enough on this white. So I'm not going to remove it too much. I'm just going to mop up the excess oils with the blending brush and get rid of the streaks. And this will maybe seem a little less exciting for right now, but again, I don't have my highlights because I just lost them with the half paste. And I can bring some of the excitement back. Now, those highlights weren't bright enough even in the first place, but I avoided them just thinking a couple steps ahead. What will it look like when I do this layer? And I'm trying to anticipate that. And I can get close, but I can't get exact. You're never going to have a perfect vision for what an effect is going to do. You could keep hammering at it until you get closer and closer and closer. But, this is just the glaze layer. And when I say just the glaze layer, this is like the favorite thing that I ever do in oil paint. Like these glazes are my one opportunity to just play, to have some fun. And I really, really, really love this stage. So if you hear me say just the glaze layer, that's just to say that I can get away with almost anything right now. And that to me is freedom. Like, because I am a realist. You know, I start kind of abstract, but I'm very much realist. I expect the finished product to invite people into realistic, recognizable depth and exaggerated color and soft edges and that feeling that they could reach in and grab this shell. I really enjoy that. So, this might have looked like it's taking a step back, but it's missing major components like those bright highlights. Maybe I can do a glaze on top of this half paste when it's thoroughly dry. It just depends on how bright those highlights go. I want that point to really stand out. I want these iridescent bright lights to really pop. I might even take a little bit of this back. I feel like that got a little bit bright compared to this whole plane. And so I'll scale that back just a little. But nothing has to be right yet. And I don't really even want it to be right. I just want it to get me one step closer to making decisions in context. So I'm going to let that settle for a bit. Anywhere where you keep your eye focused for too long, you get eye fatigue. That's a term that I learned in a book called On Color. It's by Emile Groupé. And he just says, like, you know, the more you stare at one spot, the less you really see what's going on there. It's that first impression that tells you what to do. And I really like that idea. With this shell, I got to do some drawing on it. And I feel like it needs that kind of darkness for the bright, sparkly highlights. I'm going to leave that alone. I felt like that was keyed up too bright in the first place, so I'm going to leave that alone. So the glazing layer could be finished. Now, one thing I might want to do is a more intentional glaze. So these were just more of like big color fields. This made it darker, richer, redder. This made it more washed out, a little bit brighter. This made it a little bit darker for those highlight values to read. Same thing with this one. And this made it more like the inherent color. So they all kind of had different effects, but they were all kind of the same thing, to where I just kind of slapped it and scumbled it on. This urchin has little stripes that are slightly different colors. So like there's a little red stripe here, and then it's more like this color. And then there's a little gray streak here, right? That's a more intentional glaze. So what you're hoping for is that as you glaze it, you don't really have to change the values too much, because the values will come through a glaze layer. Well, that was blocked in fairly flat. So I might want to build that up a little bit before I do another glaze on the next sitting. But, you know, again, with anything, it's just I paint a little bit and then I feel inspired. I don't have to have this plan 100% worked out. And I could, but I feel like there's some things to figure out along the way too. And especially like you might have a plan that's rather ambitious and think, well, I'm definitely going to get this done, this done, and this done. Well, it takes the time that it takes. And sometimes you're pleasantly surprised that you're going faster than you thought, because, you know, maybe you anticipated that you're going to try something and have to adjust it 4 times before you get it right. Well, sometimes you get it right the first time. I don't ever really bank on that. I just like to observe and kind of talk to the painting. The painting will tell me what it needs. And I'm going to go on the pace that it takes to make the painting kind of harmonious. And I'm going to be inspired by little creative directions to go that I might not be anticipating at first. And, that's where having a rigid plan might even get in the way. It might even stop you from making decisions that you would make better if you slowed down and just really paid attention to what the painting is telling you. So I wanted the background generally darker, and I started with umber, and that was making it too warm. And so I'm cooling it down now. I'm making it too dark. I'm going to wipe that back. Sometimes you like that little bit of airiness from the scumble, and this is what I call scumbling. Just kind of this random direction that leaves a lot of this sort of air to it, as opposed to an intentional brush stroke. So I scumbled on these glazes, but then I got rid of the streaks because I wiped it off. But here, if I wanted to leave it a little sort of airy looking, I could just leave it in the scumble, and that will create an other. And that's exactly what I want in the background. I don't want the painting to grab the eye in the background. I want it to grab the eye in the subject matter. So not only will this scumble create a darker, grayer value for these bright whites and rich color to read against, but also if the background technique is like that sort of light and airiness, like the old masters did, even up to like Sargent. The Sargent had those really sort of airy backgrounds. Then that'll be an other. These will look really solid because this looks really airy because it has all this kind of random brushwork with all that sort of weak paint being dragged by the bristles of the paint. So I like that idea. And I'm going to give it a chance for a while. And then again, just like anything that I was saying before, is I'm going to put some things down according to my vision for the painting, but I'm also going to sort of observe what's happening and whether it's going in the direction that I want, or maybe there's something even better than what I thought I wanted because the painting is telling me it's like, ooh, look at that. That's really cool. I didn't expect that. Or maybe I'm going to switch the focal point to something else because it's really popping, or maybe something that I thought was going to be really neat is now looking pretty dull, and I don't really want that to be the focal point. So again, my goals from this painting are probably not going to change radically, but they can shift in these little ways according to what the painting is telling me. Hey, Lu Jing, saw you joined.
Hi, Hans. Hi, Eugene. Hi. Hi, Hans. Yeah, I think I used to have a lot of problem to let the background stay airy. After I tried it a few times, it will become really solid.
Yeah, no, that happens. But again, you can glaze. Maybe your background gets solid, so you paint it really opaque and a little bit bright. Then you can glaze this sort of airiness on top. You'll darken it with the glaze, and you'll create the little streaks in the air. And maybe that gets too streaky or too other, and I can make up my mind later to just kind of wipe it back a little bit. But again, I don't really know what this looks like yet because it's going to be a reaction to this. The background is super duper duper important, but it's a supporting character. It's not, I mean, I'm guessing that the main character in this is going to be right in here, like between this iridescent shell and the basket. These are going to be supporting characters, especially these three, and these being primary characters. And then the background is not unimportant. It can take too much attention, and then it's actually doing a bad thing. But it can also be a really great enhancer. So this darker value makes this brighter, and that's why I didn't want to do too much. I glazed it darker, and that might look too dark until this got darker, and now it looks bright again. So again, I'm not going to second guess too much until I get these big color fields on. And like I said, glazing is my favorite thing. I can really tweak a lot, and I'm comfortable with it looking like a step backwards before it takes a step forward. So I think that's all the glazing I'm going to do. I want to glaze down here, and I need more medium already because I just put down a ton. And I'm just going to glaze the bottom here with some black. Maybe a touch of umber. I think a touch of umber. But then I'm going to do some redraw. So I already corrected myself earlier saying fix. I'm not fixing anything. I'm using the really great information I gave myself on the last sitting. And it's just that. It's just information. And so, but what I mean by information is, I don't really expect any of those shapes to be right. I didn't spend that kind of time. I didn't carefully measure every little thing. And if I did, and then I decided it doesn't work, well, that's defeating. So I could definitely do it that way. I could really carefully measure everything. Or I could do a very finished sketch on the side and then trace and transfer it onto the surface. Those are all very viable ways of doing it. It's just not the way I like to paint it. Again, I like to let the painting kind of unfold and I discover new things and I adjust my strategies and I think, well, wouldn't this be cool? I don't like to follow a really rigid path. So if I keep everything abstracted first, that's my first round of it kind of making a suggestion that I can work with. And then I do that big squint level blocking where I'm squinting at everything and I'm getting those fields of color and value and the shapes of only what I see when I squint and ignore the rest. And I'm making another round of decision making. And then I'm starting to refine and another round of decision making. By the time I get to the detail, I want to be done with decision making. I want that to be kind of just the next smaller shape, and not really much adjustment is going to happen at that point. But yeah, it could be very true that if I really super carefully drew everything and measured every little fascicle, that I wouldn't have anything to fix. But by saying fix is implying that there's a mistake. And if I treated this abstract and suggestive, there can be no mistakes. I can change any of this stuff on the suggestion of it's working, it's not working, and then do some creative problem solving that a lot of times leads to a better painting than my original plan in the first place. So I like to avoid terms like fix and mistake and I even like to avoid ideas like good or bad or artistic or whatever. These are just suggestions, and the real painting is yet to kind of emerge out of it. It's like that old Michelangelo quote where it says, I saw the angel in the marble and I carved until I set it free. It's kind of like that with this painting, is that a lot of the painting is going to be set free. It's just kind of being roughed down with big chisels, and then it's going to start getting refined. So there you go, Michelangelo. Let's go ahead and say for the camera that I'm not comparing myself to Michelangelo. What would be nice, I might get to the design on the basket, but if I don't get to the design on the basket, I'm gonna at least design these kind of horizontal bands, because I feel like they're important for understanding not only the anatomy of the basket, but also the perspective in the way these curves react to eye level. So that might be nice. But I'm gonna start here on this shell. I'm going to enhance some of the highlights, and then I'm going to work on this one. I might get to that banding in here. This I want to be way back. So the idea here is that once I develop this, I'll know how much to subdue that. I think I needed a little bit warmer, but before I think it got pale because maybe the basket was a little pale. And now that the basket is richer and darker, I can go warmer and darker here without them competing. So that's that big impact of what a glaze can do. I really love that. So I'm going to do a little series of half pastes. I'm going to see what happens. What I anticipate is that this is going to look too bright and too white. And I want a bunch of green coming through. But I don't have to get it right on this sitting. I'm going to try to get at least the pattern in place. And then if I need to glaze it with some greens and reds to bring out that iridescence, I'm gonna put that ace up my sleeve. I don't necessarily have to play that card. I just have to understand that I have it, and I'll use it if I need it. So again, this will be mostly setup work, but it's going to be a lot more specific than that first coat. And so maybe I'll attempt to put a little bit of color into this this work on the highlights, but the problem with all those colors is it's going to darken it, and I want it bright. So let's just say that I try a little bit of green into these whites and maybe a little pink into them too, and it darkens it too much. Well, then the next coat would be adding these sort of off whites onto it. But wouldn't it be even stronger is if I keyed this up a little bit too bright and then glaze those a little bit, with greens and reds, and then it'll only darken it a little bit, but it'll have that base of white almost like a watercolor. So it's like it's going to be lit from underneath. And again, some of that requires just envisioning. It's just not ready to be seen yet. And besides which, isn't it so much easier just to draw without constantly changing the color and value? I think so. So if I just draw this and just understand that it's too bright and too washed out in color, I don't really have to be, for one, finished, and for two, impressed by the colors or anything. I can just see it in my mind's eye that it's going to get pink here instead of this sort of washed out white. And then, little flashes of green through here. So I'm really, I'm thinking it's going to work. And what if I had to do 3 sittings on it or 4 sittings on it instead of 3? So what? Who do we got? Malika. Hey, Malika.
Hi, Malika. Hello. How are you guys?
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Liz, thank you so much for help. For reminding me to follow.
Wow. You cannot tell that has any color on it. Oh my gosh, that's bad. You can't. Okay, so now you can see some color. That's still really washed out. Yikes. The YouTube camera really couldn't tell there was any color on there at all. What I'm seeing in real life is a lot of color. I don't know. Maybe I got to invest in a better camera.
I can see some color on the show.
Yeah, I think the cell phone is doing a better job. You've got the Zoom feed. I was talking about the Instagram or the YouTube. I don't know. Whenever I say Zoom, I probably really mean YouTube. And on Friday nights, if I say something, it's probably YouTube. If I say Instagram, and Instagram if I say YouTube. I don't know. I don't know what my problem is there. So what I did with this is the first sitting was way too colorful and way too dark. And then I half pasted it, and now I'm just drawing the highlight values on. I might even key some of this to pure white and just leave it kind of washed out, and then glaze the iridescence on top. And like I said, I'm going to hope for the best in getting it done on the next sitting, but if I don't, so what? I'll do another sitting.
So you haven't started on the lace yet?
I glazed the table. If I get to the lace at all, it'll be just when I squint and I see the big pattern. Okay. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take a half paste of, like some grays, and simply draw the pattern. No modeling, no undulation of the cloth, no specific patterns. I'm going to be pretty generous in avoiding the cutouts. And so that when that dries, then I can literally just weave little weaves and connect the dots, and then I'll have that rich background coming through it. So a lot of this painting, I wouldn't have to do it this way, but it becomes very efficient if I do. And I'm just thinking, 3 steps ahead. So I wouldn't call this a painting 101 painting, but it's got a lot of opportunities to talk about the fundamentals, and talk about the possibilities, and talk about what, experience can give you, and as far as, being able to anticipate and envision. You all know Fritz and his work. You can look at his early stages and just say, that it's kind of the brighter, more pastel colors, and there's no darks, and he's envisioning what all that's going to look like when he gets those in. You just can't do all that envisioning without experience. Possible. It's like if I add this color on top of this, it's going to do that. Well, I mean, I don't know how you could book learn that. You'd have to develop it over time. That's what I say about a lot of the art fundamentals. It's all experiential learning. So yeah, you can get some good principles and things like that, but the feel, impossible. You're not going to learn that from a book. You know, you get it even better when you have somebody, you know, like a mentor who has made all the mistakes that you know beginners will make, learned how to get through it, picked up a lot of advice, and you know learned how to apply the fundamentals to problem solve through it. Super, super important, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
All right. I've mentioned a couple times that I'm not doing anything more than setup work. I really like the pattern of reds and greens coming through, but you know, I think with this dry brush, I can remove even more. Now that I can see it in relationship to these highlight values, I can bring back some of the greens and reds very carefully. They're still cloudier than when they started. See, now that's really rich, but I'm going to do another half paste on the next sitting. So if I bring it back to maybe a little bit too dark, that's fine. A little bit too dark and too colorful. Yeah, that's going to be much better.
What colors were you half pasting with? Was it white?
Half paste, it was mostly white. I had maybe a tiny bit of umber in there to keep it less like pure white. And I'm thinking, you know, those tertiary colors take away the chroma of things like primary and secondary colors like red and green. But all this is just white. Because again, when I blocked it in, I made it too dark, too colorful, too high chroma, so too red and too green. And I anticipated removing some of that with the half paste. Well, all that was just setup work. It was all on purpose. And will I get it right? Well, you never really know. I mean, you can take your best guess, and your best guess gets better over time, again, with building experience and being able to envision better and being more comfortable with it not looking finished from the beginning. Like, I think that trips up a lot of beginners. Like, they want that very first brushstroke to be the final sitting, or they want it to look like that portrait right away with a likeness and eyelashes and all this unreasonable stuff. Is like, no, you need a little bit of setup work, and you better be comfortable with it not looking right for a little while.
Yeah, that was my first year in the studio. I would start getting the if it was not straight away looking like what I wanted it to look like.
This is a disaster. And then you have somebody like me saying, no, this is set up. You're doing fine. And it's like, shut up. You're lying to me.
Well, it helped looking at other people's starts. I mean, you know, other students who have had more experience. It really helped being there in the studio and looking at their starts. And then you realize that, okay, this is normal. This is how a start looks like.
Well, and then you'll see somebody like Andy with the way he blocks in a rough start, and then you know that pretty quick it's going to turn into the thing, but it won't start there. And you'll see me demo, and I'll start with my abstraction, and it's like, okay, that doesn't look like the finished product, but he pulls it out pretty quick, you know?
Yeah.
And then you just develop a faith in that, you know, that your abstract start is going to get you to that finished product, at least in your artistic way.
Yeah, I think abstract starts are probably when you've had as much experience as you and Andy, but I'm not there yet.
Well, it just takes trusting what you see when you squint.
Like blocking. I mean, if I can just block in all the big shapes, I think that's where I am.
Yeah. So we all have preconceived notions of what a shell looks like, what a portrait looks like, what a figure looks like, what a dog looks like.
Right.
The problem is once you paint what you think you're seeing as opposed to what you're really seeing, then Yeah, you could put off a nice generic looking portrait or a nice generic looking figure, but if you're going to capture somebody specific or this specific dog or specific portrait likeness or something, that sort of generic idea in your head is going to get in the way. It's definitely not what you're seeing. And then to try to say, okay, this looks nothing like this model, or I drew the same nose that I always drew, but this person's head is tilted, and those are really not the shapes that I'm seeing. But I painted this sort of hieroglyph that I was taught in grade school. Like, it's all understandable. I understand exactly why people do that. It's just like, if I was going to pull them aside and say, is that really what you see?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, I get this look like, what are you talking about? Of course that's a nose. And it's like, that's not the collection of shapes that you see. And that's what abstraction is all about.
Right. I think and today was in the drawing, when we were doing the task today of the girl, that was a good lesson in, because when it comes to head tilts, that's where I struggle the most nowadays. Even with our portrait model, Joshua, his first sitting, he had a little bit more complicated head tilt, and so I did struggle trying to get the nose and the eyes on the same plane.
Well,
so,
I mean,
for a while, I did need a lot of help.
The pose that I saw had his head tilted back, and so if you draw the nose that you're accustomed to seeing, you see a little bit of that down plane, and you see, mostly the top of the nose, and the way that the nostrils get cut off and everything. That's not what happens with an upward head tilt. You see a lot of that underneath plane. You see very little of the top. It gets foreshortened. The ball of the nose is close to the eyes. Like, everything that you expect to see in those quote unquote nose shapes, it's not what you see. And that preconceived nose shape gets in the way of what you really see. And then you'll have a head that's kind of turned and a nose that's not. Well, that's a big problem.
That was a problem because, my nose kept on, I just kept on making the nose longer.
Yeah.
And it was not long because, he was looking up. And so that's because I've been making portraits with, the face looking forward, and so I was just used to putting the ball of the nose at a certain point on the face.
Yeah.
And so this was a good exercise, and even today the sculpture that we were drawing, the girl's head was tilting a little backward from the angle I was seeing, and so the nose was a challenge, even the mouth.
Right. Yeah, I mean, all that's really important, especially figures.
So you were saying the Barg book drawing, that's helpful for head tilt.
Barg, okay, so Barg has a lot of, different orientations of the eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. They're all very simple. They're kind of generic, which is good. They're very planar, but they'll show like this eye is an upward head tilt. This is a downward head tilt. This nose is an upward head tilt. This is 3/4. This is, you know what I mean? So it's going to show you all these orientations of the features in isolation. But,
okay.
So that's only so helpful. So when you have a figure model there, you're not talking about the eyes, ears, nose, mouth in isolation. You're talking about them in an overall structure. But still, it's still really helpful to understand that this unique shape is informed by the head tilt and the light source. It's not just simply, this is a nose, this is a mouth, this is a ear, right? It's either be an expert at facial features, and you might end up with a generic, really good-looking head, or be an expert on abstraction and paint what you really see. And I'm not necessarily suggesting one's better than the other. If you want to get a likeness, like a portrait commission, you really want that likeness. And I find it much easier to get the likeness if I don't have to retrofit it in from a generic head. But still, understanding a schematic is really nice because not only does it get you off to a decent structural start, because again, we're all more alike on the skull than we are in the musculature, fat, tendons, you know, things like cartilage for the nose and ears, or something like, you know, very unique, like the volume of the lips. You know, some people have a really thick upper lip, some people have a very thin upper lip, some people have a very thick lower lip, right? It's just, you know, you're not gonna put that kind of generic mouth into a specific person and expect to get the likeness. So if you start generic and then realize that you have to then come back and find the likeness through the generic, well, you're moving around a lot of things that are already kind of set. And especially if you didn't capture the head tilt, then you got a lot to change. And that's when I'd start flirting with the term fix. Like I said, that nothing that I'm doing right now is fixing. I had to correct myself, just simply because it's just it's too simple, but it's not generic. It's what I see when I squint. So it's specifically the simplified form, if that makes sense. So this is not right yet. And it's not in this sitting was not intended to be right. This is another round of setup, because this shell, you can do iridescence alla prima, but it's not an alla prima subject. You can just get the best you can. I mean, it's much better to do iridescence in layers in my Oh So Humble. But I've attempted iridescence alla prima. I just can't do nearly as good as if I build it up in layers, because these are too white and washed out on purpose, because when I glaze the greens and reds onto them, that brightness will come through that color. And so I did that on purpose. I muted down all the greens and reds from the previous sitting. I put on this overly pale white, and I really think it's going to set up well for the next sitting. But again, I've got bigger fish to fry, and that's part of my strategy. I just wanted to build this up on a second tier, and then boom, hit all these to a second round of paint. If I have the luxury of drawing some of these basket weave shapes, I'm in a really great place for that, because I don't have to change the values. I've got the values. All I got to do is draw, like with Umber, and just draw the lines. And if I don't like the lines, just draw it and you wipe them right off. If I lose the glaze a little bit, that's okay, because I already have the context to color match. So say I lose the glaze a little bit, I just mix the paint until I put a dot here and it blends perfectly in with what I have. So even if I lose little sections of the glaze, I'll be all right. So that's where I'm thinking there. So having said that, this is not complete. It's one more step better. I'm sorry, YouTube, because there's a lot of color in here, perhaps even too much, and it's hard to tell. Again, I moved the camera the last time. What if I move the painting? There's a lot of reds and greens in there, and the highlights are washed out, but they're not going to be on the next sitting. How are you on Zoom? Did I put the?
I can see a lot of colors in there. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, okay. I'm pinned on Malika's off camera. So let me try to get that back on the screen.
And I'm pinned on your painting.
Now I'm back. Okay, now I can see what I'm doing. All right, so I just wanted to make sure I put the painting back in a good spot on the camera. All right, so anyway, this is done for now. If I have a really nice soft brush, yeah, I don't feel like hunting for them. Where's my blending?
Were you thinking of blending? Is that what you were thinking?
Just a tiny bit. A tiny bit.
Very soft blend, okay.
Yeah, I'm not much of a blender, but this particular subject kind of lends itself to it. So that's why you learn all these things. It's like, yeah, I generally am not a big fan of blending. I would never discourage anybody from doing it. It's just makes everything kind of look so blurry and smushy, but that's the right effect for this.
Yeah.
So normally I'd like to develop things in terms of brushstroke, but this is if this gets a little smushy, that's fantastic. So I'm going to just go ahead and do that. This brush isn't quite as soft as I'd normally do for a blending brush, but again, it doesn't have to be perfect, and I don't feel like hunting for the right brush. Maybe that's the wrong thing to say out loud. Yes, always get the equipment that you need for the painting that you're painting on. Don't do what I'm doing. But I don't know. I think that blending did the job.
You can afford that with all your expertise, but we need the right hand tools.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, honestly, that was just a little lazy, not finding the right brush for the job. So I don't know. Let's just say I mean it when I say that you should probably not do it the way I just did it. That was a really firm bristle brush, and it could have just dragged this way too much. And instead of getting a softness to it, it could have gotten me just a big smear, and I'd just lose everything. So I don't know. I got away with it. I don't recommend that.
Duly noted. So what kind of brush do you use for hot pasting and glazes?
I like a nice bristle, hog bristle. You know, it'll be streaky and oily, but that's what helps it spread. So I just do this, except I intentionally think about the properties I want. If I want it redder, darker, warmer, too red, too warm, too dark, and I just spread it on there way more than I want, and then I wipe it back a little bit with the rag. It's probably still too exaggerated at that point, and then I might wipe it back again. Sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised with the exaggeration. And so when I do that for student work, I just wait for it. I wait for that. What did you do? Love it. Love it. It's like, relax. We're going to wipe it back. You're going to love it. I promise. But that's the thing is, like, you don't even have to love it. If you don't love it, just wipe it off, right? You can go right back to where you were. So there's really no consequence. It's all upside. Even if the glaze doesn't work, you go back to your original painting and you know what doesn't work. And sometimes what doesn't work tells you, okay, I need a different strategy and I'll find what does work. So I mean it when I say that I'm not making great decisions all the time. Just been here before. There's no reason to react to it too strongly because I've problem solved through all this stuff. Right now, I'm going with an outline just because I want to see through the chaos. I know that my general strategy is to reduce. So that means that if I go from simple to specific, it'll be to cut some of the edges rather than grow. So it's really a kind of a binary choice. Like, if this is in decent proportion, but it's a touch big and a touch simple, making it go from simple to specific will mean that I'll be modifying it more specifically by cutting rather than adding. I don't know if I've completely repeated myself or if I'm just kind of rambling, but it just helps me have a creative direction of how I'm going to do the drawing. So I can't really see this edge unless I make it too dark. So I'm making it somewhat of a crisp, dark line. It's too dark, and I just know that, and that's okay. I don't have to get upset about that as long as I know that what I'm doing is only for descriptive purposes. It's not for being the right value or the right edge. It's just to do a little bit of redraw on top of what I have. I really liked my start. It's just, it was on the simple side. And to make it more specific, it's kind of if I were going to make a mistake, it would be this way or that way. So if I were going to, okay, I said that wrong. That's more for a blocking idea. If I were going to make a mistake, I'd rather my midtones be too dark and too rich. If I was going to make my shadows, they'd be too dark and too low chroma. if I was going to make a block in for my highlights, I'd rather them be too dark and too much like the light source. So a lot of times we do highlights that are like pure white, and you just have no range. So if I make them all maybe a little bit too yellow and a little bit too dark, great, because then I can still have that pure white highlight to read against those if I want to read the pure white. But in this case, it wasn't that. It was just like, okay, so overall, my first impression says that the drawing shapes are a little too big, and I definitely don't want the shell to get bigger because I want it to feel like it can be contained in the basket. So all my drawing decisions are going to be to cut. And so not only am I finding this little spike and cutting into the simple mass that I have, but also I know that the thickness of the line, as thin as this line is going to be eliminated by working into the edge rather than keeping it, right? So even the thinness of this line, as I get rid of the outline, it's going to make it even smaller. And then my shell will overall shrink by maybe a 32nd of an inch overall, and that's going to make it better. And that seems like it's a lot of planning and sight and everything, but it's really more second nature now. Like, I don't actively think about these things. I only have to say them out loud because I'm demonstrating and trying to tell you all my thoughts. But I mean, how much do you have to go step by step as you drive your car? You don't. It's all automatic. And really, it's a very complex sequence of activities when you think about it. Same thing with tying your shoes. I mean, explain that to an 8-year-old. It's like you're talking about something that's extraordinarily complex, but we just take it for granted because we've done those same steps over and over and over again. Well, the same thing here is like, I've not only, had a lot of practice with this, but I've actually put it to words as to what I'm doing. I've taken little insights and notes as to how to apply it to the next painting and the next painting and the next painting. And this becomes these little problem solves working from simple to specific are just like, tying my shoe. It's not like I always get it right. I mean, I always get my tying my shoe right, but with art, it's maybe a little bit more complex than that. But if I painted the same painting over and over and over again, it might get to tying the shoe level, right? Because then we'd be following the same problem solve over and over again. So with tying the shoe, you follow the same sequence every single time. With driving a car, kind of. But with a painting, this painting is going to be a little different than the next in that I probably won't be drawing shells. If I did draw shells, they definitely wouldn't be in the same configuration, in the same light. That would be really boring if my entire portfolio was the same painting over and over again. So, yeah, even another shell painting would be slightly different than this one, but the same general principles of form and light and that same strategy of simple to specific and abstraction to kind of realism with the values of light, and there's that sort of category that each value falls into. Is it a highlight? Is it glancing? Is it turning shadow, reflected light, or cast shadow? Is the light refracting? Is the light reflecting? Is the light projecting? And I've played with all those ideas, and some of them were quite difficult to pull off. And now that I struggled through that, my problem solved for the next one is going to be a lot easier, just because I, not only am painting this painting, but this is my instruction manual for the next painting of high texture or little stripy details or, basket weave anatomy, like what makes this tick. And then let's say I don't have the same count of weaves, but I have the right anatomy. Nobody will know. Nobody will know. So I try to hold on to all those insights. I really enjoy teaching, but with teaching, you're also having to articulate all this stuff, and that really helps. If you can articulate what you're doing, you'll learn it so much better. So maybe not sit there and talk to yourself in the public studio, but if you can put your problem solve to words like, I need this because of that. If you can do that, then you're going to be understanding your process a lot better. And with teaching, I have to do that all the time. So, yeah.
Are you the part that you're doing right now, are you cutting in with the background color?
No, that would be too specific. Right now, I just want to draw.
Okay.
I wanted to glaze first because I didn't want all these drawing lines to have to be avoided with the glazes. Again, you saw me. I was just kind of scribbling that paint on there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to do that with these drawing lines in here. Either the paint would pick up these lines and spread them all over the place, and then what good did they do? Or I'd have to carefully avoid them, and then I'm not having any fun.
Well, I guess what I was asking is if you're drawing with the background color to reduce that show.
I'm drawing just simply with raw umber right now.
Okay.
Onto my squint level shapes. I find that a lot of them are already working. They just, these little spikes. I'm going to put them into that network of 5 values.
Okay.
And so that's pretty easy, right? Because I already have a sense of where I'm going with 5 values. A highlight looks like this. A glancing light looks like this near the highlight and like this near the shadow. Reflected light is a wild card. That's a little less predictable, but it'll be in context, so it'll be a lot easier to figure out anyway. And then cast shadows, those are pretty easy to predict. So like that right there was a major change, but I don't have to worry about it right now. I'll eventually mix a color that matches this background, and I'll go over that opaquely. But do I have to do that now? No, I'm just drawing right now. So, yeah, that might bother somebody when they're painting, because this is looking kind of flat and they're not in the right colors, or there's no finesse at all. But again, you sort of build a sense of comfort over time. What else I've developed over time is like, maybe you would think that I'd have to show off for the camera. Well, I've already worked that bug out with all those crazy challenges we've done on Friday night. I mean, some of those crazy challenges, they look terrible before I can kind of pull them together by the end. And that's if I pull them together by the end. So I've gotten a lot more comfortable making this look cursory and rough for a little while. Not really panicking to make sure that the people watching think it looks good. I've worked that out.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, especially like crazy ones, like remember that one where I had to paint the model as if she were upside down?
Yeah.
Obviously she wasn't. And oh my gosh, the body turned out okay, but it took me forever to figure out how to get the orientation right, because I don't do left and right very well. And by the time I got the face, not only was it upside down and really difficult to make that conversion, but I didn't have much time either. And so I butchered Monica's face. I mean, it was awful. And it was okay. I was just like, okay, this challenge got me,
So was that a static pose or was that a sitting pose?
That was like she was kind of on the block, so semi-standing. And
Because
I still have the painting upstairs. Just ask me about it. I'll pull it down. You'll see. That is not a good portrait head. and it really kind of kills the rest of the painting. But it took me so long to figure out how to make like the knee over the hand and all this stuff is just like left, right. Like I was just so confused by it. Well, really, that taught me a lot too. In that, you know, if you're just painting the abstract shape, it shouldn't matter, but it did. It really got me. So what I'm saying is, okay, just draw the abstract pattern. That's really freaking hard.
Yeah, but you couldn't turn her. I mean, you were painting upside down, but you couldn't turn her upside down.
Obviously.
So you couldn't convert that.
We don't pay her enough for that.
It just seems like that would be really hard.
Okay.
Really what else was.
Monica, you got to do a handstand for a little bit. No, I think we'd have to hire like Cirque du Soleil acrobats for that one.
You get way more people on Friday.
Well,
Model who can do a headstand for this one.
we had a model like that once. His name was Shaka. Really, really great model. Very well built, super acrobatic. We got the those chains over, you know, the pulley. And he actually held really acrobatic poses, like suspended from the chains, and held it. It was the most unbelievable thing. And he did it for the meager pay that, you know, the Schuler School can afford to pay models. And it was really something. It's a shame, though. He died eventually of cancer, like, I don't know, maybe... Was it cancer? I don't know. It was either cancer or AIDS or something, but really great guy. Shame. But that was maybe like, I don't know. My grandmother was still alive, so at least before 09. So maybe 07, 06, something like that. But yeah, it was really, I don't know how it was even possible what he was doing. Really incredible. So again, I'm really just kind of roughing this in. These are more specific shapes, and I could be trying to do all this in the right color and the right value. But what that would be, I would have to get so specific rather than just kind of setting a parameter. And I still kind of want to see how all these shapes fit together. So this is just a step to get a okay drawing, a lot more specific, and then, like I said, everything gets into one of those 5 values. So it's either going to be a highlight, it's going to be some of these glancing lights, which are brighter near the highlight and darker near the shadow. And then there's, at some point, we're not facing the light source. That's our turning shadow. Some people call it terminator, some call it bedbug line. And then reflected lights depend on how shiny it is, how close it is to the thing reflecting, and how bright the thing that's reflecting, and what color the thing that's reflecting. So that's a wild card value. I'd really rather figure that out in context, and we're building context. So again, if I just come in with a drawing line, that saves myself a lot of specificity and keeps it more about just simple drawing shapes, and we'll get the value later. But I feel like this order was important because the specific values that I'm going to put on all these drawing lines will already have context based on those squint levels. So yes, this is getting more refined, but I'm not changing the shapes radically. They're just little tweaks. And so the order is really, really specific. It's really... Again, mass conception are abstract shapes that you kind of envision what the mass looks like. Like a sphere would be a circle. Some of these would be triangle shapes. Like that's a triangle right there. That's a circle. This is a circle and a bigger circle, right? Triangle. And they don't have to be specifically geometric shapes, but they do have to be somewhat abstract for what I'm talking about. And they're just kind of placeholders for size and proportion and the overall composition. So then that gets broken down into lights and darks. So that's still very, very simple, gestural. And then that gets broken down into either 5 values, if you're in drawing especially, but or alla prima. But if you're doing underpainting, maybe not, because underpaintings are pretty reduced in their contrast range. But anyway, this stage is a little bit of refinement, and I'm in context. I already know what kind of value it gets when I fill in these outlines, and all I have to do is concentrate on whether there's a little spike there, or this is just a little bit of a cut in, but nothing radical. It's all just going from simple to specific. So I don't know, I hope I explained that well enough. If I did the first 2 sittings well, then these are really minor cuts. There's no really major shapes. And I made sure that if it didn't have the abstract relationships that I see when I squint, you go no further and go no faster. Like, there's no rush to get past that first step. And it takes what it takes. If you rush that, you're going to set a bad foundation. It's just like a building. If I rush setting the steel beams of the skyscraper because I'm excited about the windows, I'll have pretty windows until the whole thing falls down. Like, nothing will really, it won't have that foundation that it needs. So detail can never save a painting. Detail is something that is really nice to look at on top of a structure that works. And the first 2 sittings were all about structure. It was first drawing and getting a composition, and then those big fields of shapes that I see when I squint. And now I'm refining the shapes, and then I'll be filling in these lines with their appropriate value and color according to its category on the sphere: highlight, glancing lights, turning shadow, reflected light, cast shadow. It sounds very simple. It makes the process simpler. It's still hard to execute. So I'm not saying just, but you can see that these little tweaks, it's barely moving. And you probably don't even see on the camera some of these drawing lines because it's a dark line against a kind of dark background. But it's giving me a lot of clarity as to, for one, going from simple to specific, but for 2, a lot of it's just verifying that, this is working, which is very helpful. If I'm trying to draw this specific shapes and they just don't fit, that doesn't work. That's a problem solve. And so the problem solve is going to make the painting better. But what's just as important is just saying, I'm drawing these lines and I don't really have to change much. It's just a little tiny spike here and a plane change there, but it's not a redraw. And that's really important information. That's really going to tell me I don't really have to change much. That's really great. So this is a little slower and a little bit more tedious than some of those previous layers that were moving really rapidly. But I'm really encouraged by the way these drawing lines are fitting in. It doesn't always work that way. But because the first layer is so simple, the drawing line especially, but the fields of squint level values, because they're so simple, if I did have a drawing conflict at this stage, I wouldn't hesitate to move it. There's nothing to protect. It was just so simple and suggestive. But I'm suggesting here that, it was a really good sitting last time. I'm not really having to move anything. So Very encouraged by that, because this is a very complicated painting. So I just completed the redraw on this. I could do a little bit more with this little turning shadow here, little spike, another little bump here that I don't want the same as this one. This one's bigger. If that comes in, then this has to scoop out even further. And then a little jog and a smaller bump here. So far, so good. And so it looks a little harsh. Maybe I'll bring the painting up to the camera so you can see this just a little bit better. But yeah, really, really encouraged by these drawing lines. Because even if they didn't work, they'd be doing their job. I'd say especially. It's really great when your drawing lines work, but you got to consider it a victory when you can find the mistake this early. And that's hard to consider when you're a new artist, that when you find a mistake at this stage, it's not to, you know, slam your hand down and say I'm a bad artist. It's to say, thank goodness I'm finding these corrections at this stage and not when everything's really refined detail and texture and thick paint and these moments of the painting that you just think are so cool. You really, 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 really don't want to change them. And so celebrate finding mistakes at this stage. And, you know, if you don't find very many mistakes, if they're just little tweaks, then you can celebrate that too. So this stage is a win-win. And I would say by the nature of all these drawing lines mostly supporting my simple shapes, you know, I'm really encouraged by it. So some of these drawing lines here suggested something that might be worth considering. There's more of an overlap of this urchin over that spike, and there's more of an overlap into this. I could certainly pull this off as being a smaller urchin, but the real setup is suggesting that this is bigger in relationship to the other two. I could consider that. I don't have to change it. It's not like I couldn't make up a little bit of shell before reaching the urchin, but let me just experiment with it and just see what it would look like if I went a little bit bigger. I don't like it touching that edge. So I'm going to take a clean brush with just a little bit of medium and get rid of that drawing line. But that's intriguing here. The only issue with that is I would feel like with the orientation of the shell, if I add this, I'd probably move the opening up here. And that's okay. You know, I'm going to keep that. I like this slightly bigger design here. So if I just have to paint over this opaquely, I'll put some of the richness back in with a glaze. And that might be worthwhile. Again, I'm making decisions as I go. This one is a pretty minor one. Because again, the urchin shell, it can be smaller than I'm seeing it. It's not a big deal. But I like that as a creative decision. So this is done. This redraw is done. And I'll show it to you on the camera. And the shapes got more specific, but I didn't really have to modify the proportions too much. That's on top of the squint level block in, and that's on top of the glaze. I've already done those. I mean, I finished the squint level on the first sitting, and I did the glaze to start this sitting. And you can see that the glaze didn't stop anything on the redraw. So now it's just about those 5 values. I think I'm going to go ahead and forgo the idea of doing those stripes in this sitting, because I like that little creative decision to move that. So I'm going to go ahead and get that rocking and rolling right here. Let's see if that color match works. Too warm. And when I do that little dot, I don't expect that to be right. And I do exactly what I just did. I put it down and I say, is it too light, too dark, too warm, too cool? Really that simple. And so while I'm at it, not only am I going to paint to this new edge, too warm, not only am I going to paint to this new edge, but I'm also going to model the turning form while I'm at it. And then on the next sitting, I'll glaze on those stripes and perhaps even do those little bumps, but maybe the bumps would be better on top of the glazed ribs. The exception to that would be if I felt like it was mostly done, then I'd maybe attempt to do those wet on wet. And I would talk to you all about like paint management and how much paint I'd want on the brush. And by that, you might assume that I'm talking about keeping the paint thin. Well, absolutely not. I'm talking about if I want little tiny detailed dots to sit on top of wet paint, I want to be thicker than that previous layer. It's going to sit, my paint is going to sit on top of that previous layer. If it's the same thickness or thinner, it's just going to mix. And I can do that on purpose. So watch this. This paint is just going to sit on the surface. If I let the brush get weak, now they're mixing. And so I can predict that because I've developed a lot of feel. Again, feel isn't something that you can pick up from a book or, get that single bit of information from the guru. That's not going to happen. It requires a feel, and feel takes time to develop. It just takes experience. And so what helped me develop feel is obviously practice. That there's no substitute for that. But the other thing is I stopped using solvent, and I don't really recommend it per se. But because I stopped using solvent, I didn't clean my brushes anymore. And so really, at best, I just give my brush a swipe, and that's it. And the reason I get away with that is because of paint management. If I am careful about the volume of paint that I have on the brush and limit my brush strokes to 2 or 3, then my paint sits on top of that previous wet layer and doesn't mix. It doesn't make mud. And so if I am constantly painting and using too many times the brush hits the surface without getting fresh paint, this paint deposited all of its paint onto the surface, and now it's really weak paint, and now it's just blending with everything, making mud. So you develop a feel for that over time, especially if you're really conscious about it. When I stopped using solvent and I had these dirty brushes, I really had to be very conscious on the amount of paint I had on the tip of the brush, and I really had to be better about going back to the palette more. And I've gotten that. When I make a mistake, if I take too many brush strokes and don't go back to the palette, I really see it right away. I know the problem. I see the mud happening. I see the mixture. So say on the flip side of that same argument, let's say I wanted to break up this abruptness from this brightness to that middle tone to that shadow. Let's start with the bright stuff. Let's start with the bright stuff right here, a little tiny bit brighter. There's no radical highlight here, so I'm not really looking to have a big glob of brightness here. Nothing in this urchin is as bright as anything in the light on that shell, which is another consideration too. It's like a lot of times we tend to paint in isolation, but every mark that I hear has its relevance to the other shells and to the basket and to the background. And it's really good to think about how everything relates to everything. But That's an aside. Right here, I'm just kind of letting the brush get weak. I'm letting them smash together. I'm letting it transition from that big kind of blocky light to this blocky middle tone. I'm going to keep the integrity of the shadow, but I'm going to soften the edge, and that's wet paint into wet paint. So what if I accidentally, whoops, I went too far? Fine, no problem. And a lot of times I'll do that on purpose. Oh, obviously I did it this time on purpose, but sometimes I'll intentionally take the shadow too far and then work the light into it. And this time I worked the light a little too far, and now I'm going to work the shadow into it. But this shadow would only work if we had a weak light source and we have a strong light source. So the rest of the painting has this richness of the dark shadows. It has the edge of the cast shadows being really sharp and dark. It turns rapidly from light to shadow. So this softness doesn't really make any sense. It's okay. I'm just going to reestablish it. And I'm going to go across the form. It's going to really sit on top. And now I just kind of work it, again, work it into the light just a little bit with weak paint, letting them transition together. And there I got my soft edge. Still have to get rid of that outline. I'm going to do that with the shell. I'm not really worried about that. If you keep your mixing files on the painting, this is the difference between oil paint and acrylic. Because we lose all our mixing piles unless you're just super conscious of it. Maybe an experienced acrylic painter would keep their piles or whatever, but on my oil painting palette, these piles stay fresh, so they're just little tweaks. I know that I'm moving in a creative direction from warmer to cooler, a little washed out where the highlights are, and I think I could actually go a tiny bit richer in the highlight. If I go too warm, I'll start competing with the basket. If I go too cool, I'll be competing with the shell. So it really has to fit into a parameter for me to be happy with it. But I feel like I can go a little bit more colorful, a little bit brighter in this area and transition to that gray or cool, moving away from my warm light. So this urchin got a lot better. It got a little bit bigger. And it's a nice setup for these values to come through the glazes that I'm going to put that stripe on. So it's a really nice foundational layer for the next sitting. If I really thought it was perfect, if it had the modeling that I wanted and it had the, if I didn't do that size consideration, then I could certainly have put those stripes on in this sitting. So again, I'm just kind of talking to my painting. It has a voice. It can say, okay, you know what? Wouldn't it be cool if, and then I either listen to it and say, okay, that's not very convenient, not worth it. Or I can say, hey, that would be cool. I'm going to do a little bit more of a setup on this sitting, and then the next sitting, I'll glaze that pattern. No big deal. No big deal. So now the urchin got better. I like that little glow of reflected light. I feel like the basket could be putting some more warmth into the shadow right here, but not there, because that would be cool. But I'm going to take a little alizarin and some sienna into this reflected light coming off the basket's handle, and maybe a tiny, tiny bit brighter than that. So you'll see that I didn't carefully avoid the handle, and now we're talking about proximity. So if I get to the handle today, I'm going to superimpose this over that, and it'll pull off that sense of depth just a tiny bit better. Very, very minor consideration, because I could certainly have avoided that handle, but not only would I have had to paint really super careful, which isn't as fun for me, or just wait, right? Just be patient and just know that this edge is going to get better when I'm ready to handle the basket, right? And so again, if you don't feel like you have to have everything right off the bat, then that doesn't bother you at all. If it bothers you in particular, fine. Doesn't bother me. All right, so working these shapes. So again, there's going to be 5 values that I'm going to consider. I could make those mixing piles. That's not really the way I work, but I know a lot of artists that I really respect that do that. One that pops into mind first is maybe Scott Christensen. Scott Christensen will look at a landscape and he'll mix some pre-mixed colors that he really likes. And then all those pre-mixed colors just get little tweaks. It's really great. I don't work that way, but I respect it. And maybe somebody else like Scott Tallman Powers really, really respect his work. And he might say, well, right at this stage, we really need the lightest light and darkest dark. Well, I don't like to work that way because I feel like those spots, those accents are so super special that I'd rather build specificity and then know exactly where to put them and what value I need and what color to surround them with. So I wait longer than somebody like Scott Powers for my accents. And I want to just make super clear that I'm not saying that he's wrong. He's exactly right for the way he paints. So I don't want to suggest that anything that I'm doing here is right. It's the system that works for me. And I do value efficiency more than some people. Again, not a good or bad thing. Sometimes efficiency is at the expense of, super fine details, right? Super fine details are not a very efficient way to paint. But other artists might have, this feel that, the choppiness of the brushstroke is more important than the details, right? Or, all kinds of different circumstances that makes one artist unique from the other in what they like, the goals they have for the paintings, the styles that are just kind of natural for them. Like there's a really famous artist that came out of the Schuler School. Everyone from Schuler's is about to roll their eyes. Will Wilson. that he said that, and I believe this wholeheartedly, that your style picks you. You don't pick your style. And you don't have to fight that. So the way I'm painting really works for me, and I'll tell you exactly why I do it. I'll tell you exactly why I don't really believe in calling anything a mistake early on because of the way I simplify. Whereas somebody else might say, okay, we're going to build from a central focal point and make it all very right or wrong for this spot and work their way out. If that works for them, great. That really, really does not work for me. Okay, so I'm kind of building around those highlight values, and then I'm going to just kind of soften some edges. Whoa, that's too dark. There's a warmth to this shell coming off of the basket and from the urchin shell that I want to differentiate from that one being cooler. So if I err, I pose this question a lot. If I err, I'm going to err on the side of slightly too warm. Because I want those highlights, I'm also going to err a little bit on the side of dark. If they weren't sparkling so much to me, then maybe I could key it up a little bit brighter. If I'm rambling, somebody just yell, "Shut up."
No, you're doing great.
It's all useful.
Yeah, we're all learning a lot.
I'm looking up all these people that you're talking about.
You're looking up Will Wilson?
Well, no, not Will, but the other.
Scott Tallman Powers? I took a workshop with him for a plein air painting landscape workshop, and oh my gosh, he's so good. He's really super nice too. That helps. Like his personality he's really humble, very nice to talk to, funny, engaging. That really goes a long way. But yeah, very extraordinary. But again, even if I highly respect his work and just really respect it, doesn't mean I have to paint like him, right? And we might even get to a similar finished product, but I'll follow the path that gets me, efficiently to my finished product in a way that makes sense to me. Like I don't have to chase other people's style just because they're extraordinary.
That's true.
It's good to consider it. And in the workshop, I did try to paint like him because that was the point of the workshop. I wanted to kind of add his insights and skill set into my sort of toolbox of experience. So, you finish the workshop and then maybe your style changes slightly, but I don't get through. I try to paint the way the artist tells me during the workshop, and then hopefully that just kind of influences me a little bit, but I still paint like me. I don't go chasing other people's styles. I just feel like there's a natural way that I see and depict that works better for me than artificially trying to fight my natural tendencies. But I'm always up for understanding how to pull this effect off more or more efficiently or more stylistically or more expressively or more coloristically. All that's really important. And always keep my mind open for that. Okay, so I'm going to self-critique. I'm starting to get a little nitpicky, and that's bothering me a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and tell myself, look, you better move on from this shell, stop being so specific, and move on to something else. Come back to this if you have the luxury of the sitting going so well that you can revisit it. But I have so much more to block in that I don't feel like perfecting this shell is really a good idea, just because of what's it even going to look like when more things get their relative colors and values, especially that basket. So really not a good idea to keep hacking away at this shell in the way I paint. Again, some people like to build up from specificity. I like to build up from abstraction and simplicity. So this is already getting a little bit beyond abstraction. Boom, ready to stop. And, students of mine will hear a lot of critiques like, move this around, increase this value range, put this into a better context, things like that. My self-critiques are much more. not in a damaging way, not in a offensive way, but I have certain expectations and protocols that I like to follow. So just telling myself like, look, you're already getting a little mired into edge work and maybe too small of a shape, and it's time to move to another section. Back to Scott Tallman, or not Scott. Back to Scott Christensen. I was saying how I don't like to premix these fields. I certainly could. I could mix 5 values for the white shell, 5 values for the urchin, 5 values for the. No, that's crazy complicated with the iridescence, but I could, and then just each one of those gets these little tweaks. Instead, I just do that. I mix the same color and same ish value over and over again, and they're slightly different because I mix them from scratch, and just kind of modify those piles as I go. So like this shell is going to start with a color mixing base, but I'm going to keep kind of remixing that same color into my color pile, and it's only going to just get a tiny bit different, but I feel like that gives it a little, I don't know, a little spice. Just gives it a little bit of just the subtlest little shift. Yeah. It's not gonna be too formulaic, but what if it accidentally gets too formulaic? So what? I'll glaze it and I'll build the highlights back up. I can almost guarantee that I don't get the variety that I want. So even when typically it works one way and this next time it doesn't, so what? You can problem solve that. And if I did it Scott Christensen's way, would I be then able to adapt it and make it my own? Absolutely. So not really too concerned about that.
So Scott, he premixes colors?
Some of the demonstrations that I've seen he did, maybe that's not always the way he does it. Like I don't always follow the same path. You can probably see that in those crazy figures that I do. But I've seen at least 2 or 3 of his demos. Really, really lovely landscapes, just tremendous. I've seen him mix the kind of squint at the scene and say, okay, these are big generalities of the values of the trees. These are big generalities of the colors of the sky. These are big generalities of these clouds over here, big generalities of this field. And then he'll have, just the ability to kind of tweak those as he goes. So not big flat values, but, kind of built upon a mixing pile that already kind of works in its generality.
Okay.
It works great for him. Again, it's not really the way I like to do it, but I really respect it. So what I was saying in that section of the dialogue that I was doing is just that I have that mentality. I just don't make the mixing piles. I have that mentality that it's either a highlight range of values, whether it's glancing values, turning shadow and cast shadow, and then we get the variety of reflected lights depending on what's reflecting, how close it is, how receptive to light is the thing that's receiving the light, the color, all that changes per reflected light. So if the reflected light is being informed by the basket, it gets very warm. If it's being informed by a shell, it might be cooler. If that shell is really close, that reflected light is going to be brighter. If it's really far, it might be barely influential at all. I mean, this is shiny, so it might pick up some extra browns. And this is kind of shiny, so I can put a little brown on the edge. But if it's not shiny, it won't be picking up as much light. So, again, the reflected light is kind of your wild card. It's not going to be as predictable as the other ones. So I don't really like a formula for the reflected lights.
Okay.
Reflected lights can be very expressive as long as you understand them. They can kill your 3-dimensional form if you get them too bright, because then it's no longer part of the shadow range of values, but they can make your painting really neat if you can keep the value in the right context and play with the color intensity and the softnesses and stuff like that. They can be really great. So it's not like I'm saying I'm against reflected lights. It's just I'm talking about how if we could categorize these different values except for reflected light, just because there's so many variables to it. Okay, I'm painting. I'm recognizing today that I'm just a little on the picky side today. A lot of times in this stage, I'm still being a little bit more general, but today I'm noticing that I'm being picky. So I might not even be the same artist from day to day as well as subject to subject. But again, if I recognize that, then I can just tell myself, it's like, okay, be very conscious of spending too much time and being too specific in any one area. So my alarm bells go off and I just say, okay, I need to look out for this. It's just like, in figure, if you have a tendency, then you can look out for that tendency. If you make heads too big, to be really conscious of the head size. If you make lower bodies too small, and so today is less about like a consistency from painting to painting, just like figure to figure. It's more of like today, I'm noticing that I'm being a little picky as opposed to other days when I keep it more generic and simple. Sometimes I'll notice that I'm rushing too much and I need to slow it down. Today, I feel like I need to speed it up. And so I need to just keep that sort of nagging thought in my head as like, okay, move on, move to the next spot, move to the next spot. And the reason why that's so important is because I want to compare everything to everything. The more I can build up that second tier specificity, the better I can look back at the entire painting and seeing if everything is harmonious. If I get any one spot perfect, then now I'll feel like I need to protect that if it doesn't work, or build the entire painting around that specificity, which is super inefficient, or leave something that just doesn't work. And that's obviously the worst of the three. I guess I shouldn't say obviously. Definitely not my favorite. If your painting doesn't work from, a painting like this at least 10 feet away, nothing closer is going to make it better. Doesn't matter. It could be just the coolest little detail. It's not going to save your painting. So again, the importance of being able to compare everything to everything instead of feeling like I'm going to work one little spot until it's perfect is super important to me. So you can see that some of the outlines are starting to disappear. It's still maybe a little bit on the, outliney side. That's okay. That can go away later. Okay, so one thing that's going to help is once I develop these spikes, then I can shift to a bigger brush. Those are just tiny shapes. So my rule on brushes, it's not my idea. It's not even my wording. The wording comes from my brother, but use the biggest brush that you can handle for the shape that you're painting. Right, so these are pretty big shapes. This is too small of a brush. So I'll just give myself another little criticism. It's just encouraging me to be too slow and too picky. So if I'd have had a bigger brush, these would be broader brush strokes. I could leave this area sooner and get to something of bigger need faster. And fast isn't always the right metric. Painting needs what it needs, but I'll make better decisions for the entire painting if I get, more specific but not detailed throughout the entire painting. So this is just that next tier of breaking simple abstract shapes down into smaller, more specific shapes. But I'm still not ready for that ultimate finished detail. Like there's little tiny ribs of red that go across here. Not ready for that. Some of these little tiny bumps and spikes are great, but I'm just, just not there yet. So I just put down some marks and I stopped right there because these are too bright. And now I can compare them to here, which should be brighter than that. So I stop, make the little adjustment, and work into it. That's better. Wouldn't have done me any good to just keep hacking away. Now, what I could have done is put it in and let it dry and then glaze it darker. Could. But since I caught it early, I think it's just better to make the small adjustment to be in a better key. Keying it a little bit dark so that it compares to this other stuff. There I go again. Detail really can be very distracting. And this is going to end up being a very detailed painting. But I just don't want to be so wed to detail that I start making bad decisions. Just like I was kind of mentioning before. I'm almost at the 2-hour mark. I'm making no progress at all. Yikes. Pick up the pace. Bigger brush.
But haven't you worked more on the bigger shells outside the basket and on the arches? I think you have made progress.
I've made some progress.
Yeah.
I was just hoping to move a little faster today.
One with the spiky shell is just too much detail, but probably it's gonna take the time it's gonna need.
Well, that's difficult not because of detail, but because of iridescence. Iridescence is really tricky.
Yeah.
And like I said, I could have done a lot more on this sitting, but there's just bigger needs than getting that perfect. And so I'm not. I told Li Jing, I said that I might not get to the basket today. Well, if I'd have done a better pace, if I didn't get so nitpicky, then maybe I would have had time for just drawing the lines in on the basket. I don't know. I'm already at 2 hours. Maybe.
Yeah, no problem. I think watching you doing the show is also very helpful.
Well, again, if my big priority were the basket, that'd be fine. But I will get to the basket. I guess I could have picked the basket over the shells. I just was kind of in a. This is really difficult with the iridescence, so I really wanted to get a coat on this for sure. And this is very intricate, so if I don't get it right on this sitting, then at least I'll have some head weight on the next one. The basket, yeah, it's tricky, but it's not maybe as tricky as this because it's regimented. These shells, to me, are more chaotic. And it might just take a little bit of push-pull to get it to where I want it to be. And yeah, I could have done the basket. Like I said, I was making a conscious decision to cut into my drawing lines.
Yeah, I'm just watching how you get rid of your outlines of drawings.
Yeah, I'm going to do it even more when I'm ready to work on that spike.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I feel it's hard because when I draw the lines, they have some thickness, and then the accuracy becomes the problem.
Yeah, No, I understand that completely. Nice thin descriptive lines are really helpful. I really like a lot of outline. I think it really just gives me that creative vision of where I'm going. It gives me that clarity that I like. I understand, the downside of outlines too, in that very hard edged. If they flatten, they if you want something to look round, you really don't want an outline. But the outline is just temporary. It if you can keep it thin, great. If you understand how you're going to trim the line when you get to that second level and you can see it in your mind's eye, then fine. But yeah, really, it's just a temporary thing to just build some clarity and look at how like one shape differentiates from the next. And then I'm coming in wet into wet to lose that line very specifically. And I'm generally going to cut into these lines, but sometimes I might find that it's the opposite. Maybe I'd want to add to lose the outline. I just want more times than not to cut rather than add, if that makes sense. Like it's not such a rigid protocol that it's always add. I'm going to look out for a little, again, what the painting tells me to do. I mean, ultimately, I'm the decision maker, but I'll see things better when they're there.
It's really looking excellent.
Thank you, Liz.
I love it.
I'm about to start that adventure down here. That lace, dreadful. I don't know why I keep doing this to myself.
You know, when you glaze that big shell,
Uh-huh.
well, you glaze the whole painting, but you really darken that shell, and it just looks so three-dimensional.
Well, thanks. Well, see, it was keyed up so brightly that I really don't think these smaller, more specific highlights would actually read. But that was fine, because if the whole thing shifts, it might look temporarily dark for just a tiny moment, but then everything kind of neutralizes because everything compares to everything. So it's just a little small moment where it might look too gray, but then you start looking somewhere else and you look back at it and all of a sudden it's not. It's like you can still see your lights, you can still see your darks, but they're just shifted a little bit darker, grayer, and now your highlights read. And so I can just draw all these lights on top, and they actually read against something darker. And I don't know. I mean, I'm a huge fan of glazing. You know that.
I do, but I feel like I can reach in that basket and take that shell.
Ah, cool.
And
Thanks.
also the other shell, the iridescent shell. I like that one too.
Yeah, that's coming along. I can't wait till I really flesh out those pinks and
Greens?
and greens. Yeah, but you know what you can help me with?
What?
All three of you really. While I'm at the art school, make sure I go home with some sap green. I can't glaze with this permanent green it's like a chrome green. It's too opaque. So it was fine for that foundation layer. Yeah, I want a transparent green. So Viridian would work, but I really don't like Viridian. But that would work because it's transparent. Phthalo green would work. But
Too strong?
sap is my favorite. No, it's not a matter of too strong. It's just sap is my favorite just because of that yellow, that warmth. Well, yeah, definitely transparent. I mean, that's the reason the chrome won't work, is because the chrome is just too opaque. But I'm really talking about the warmth of it. I really like the look of sap green.
Okay.
And if I remember, I need to just come home with it, so I'll have it. For some reason, I probably just ran out, and I can't find any here in my home studio. I'm surprised I don't, because it's one of my only greens that I put on my palette. I have a very simple palette. I can mix almost every green that I want. What I can't mix very well is a pure green that's dark, warm, and transparent. And that's exactly what SAP provides. Like, I can mix cool greens, fairly opaque, fairly transparent, with the the transparency of the blues. But then,
like a pepper green?
Like a what?
Like a green pepper?
Like a, yeah. Well, yeah, they can be pretty warm. Yeah.
That's not a cool one.
No. I mean, I guess it depends on the pepper, but yeah, if you're thinking about just your standard bell pepper, those are pretty warm. I guess it would depend on the light too.
Yeah, I always thought that would be cool.
Oh, painting peppers? Yeah, they're great because they're pretty shiny, so they get these really bright, sparkly highlights and pretty rich greens and a lot of reflected light. They're a lot of fun.
I mean, I thought that it would be like a cool color. I mean,
go for it. Peppers are fun to paint.
I meant cool, like in temperature. You know what I mean?
Yeah, whether that green leans blue or yellow. Yeah, sure. Daniel Green taught, he's no longer with us, but he taught that, the difference between warm and cool is whether it leans yellow or leans blue, which I guess for the most part is true. I think it's a little oversimplistic because the same color can read warm and cool depending on the context. So, like, raw umber is very cool amongst warms. That same raw umber is very cool, or very, what did I say the first time? Very cool against warms, but very warm against cools. So it'll look like a brown amongst like blacks and blues and deep greens, but it'll look like gray against, all this stuff, all this warmth. Oh, that's just raw umber right there. I mean, it looks pretty cool. So that's a little simplistic. I mean, it helps to have a simple version and a complex version in your head. Really, it depends on what the light is doing. So, did I lose somebody?
Yeah, Malika.
Malika bolted. I won't take offense to it. Or at least I'll keep saying it until I believe it. How do I do this? I'm on a screen. What is going on with the screen?
Is that your YouTube screen?
No, it was Zoom.
Malika's back. Yay.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, I don't know why my call dropped.
I said the wrong thing. You sent that as a warning shot. But I don't really know what I said, Malika.
I don't even know what happened.
Believe me, I've been trying to do these videos. Tech issues are, oh my gosh. I've been mired in tech issues. Especially.
I know that you always try to, try something different, try something new, and it works for a while, and then back to the same problem.
I mean, YouTube has been the plague of my existence. It just seems like I've had so much trouble with cameras, like just the screen will go blank and I won't even realize when that happens.
Right.
And I'm just painting along and then I look back and then all of a sudden there's nothing. And it's just like, well, how long has that been? And how do I fix it? Because for some reason with YouTube, if that signal gets interrupted, even for like a split second, you lost them and you can't get it back. Like you have to start a whole new feed, which you lose everybody, and you have to completely re-advertise it. So it's like, I'm sure somebody here knows how to do it better than I, but those are the troubles I've had to come across. And, like you were here with Natalie suggesting, well, why don't you just do all these videos and research and stuff like this? It's like, I don't have time for that.
Nobody has time.
Not if I'm producing content and teaching and raising 2 young boys. It's like, that's going to be pretty low priority. And I'm just going to have to fumble through it for a while. But, I understand her point. It's well-intentioned. And like, I understand that, one person might be able to carve that kind of time or to be a bigger priority for them. And both of those are legitimate. It's just, not for me right now. Not if
I'm actually the same way. I usually just make a lot of mistakes, learn from my mistakes, and then find a sweet spot which works for me. And so when it comes to doing your diligent homework, I'm in the same boat as you. I don't have the time, and so I just learn as a role.
Yep, well said. All right, so I just came across a little drawing thing that I could have gotten away with, but I kind of like the position of that new spike. So I made the drawing correction, and then I deleted the old line in that order quite on purpose. And now I'm doing the redraw over wet paint, which is making my drawing lines a little bit on the washed out side, and that's okay, because this doesn't really have to be a rich dark. It's just, if I have to go over the line a couple times, that's why. And who would know if this spike is too big or too small? I don't really have to worry about that too much. It just has to be kind of commensurate with the other ones. And I think for the most part it is. So that's going to be in my head as I do the problem solving, is less to do, is it right? Or more to do is, does it work? And sometimes, like especially in figure or portrait, you really consider whether it's hurting the anatomy if something doesn't quite work in the pattern level. But you can even get away with stuff like that in portraits too, especially if you're on a live model and those poses are shifting a little bit. Like you can't just say absolutely right or wrong every time there's a tiny movement in the model, or when they come back from the break and it's just like it's not exactly the same pose. So I'm going to treat the shell the same way. I'm going to look for what I really like in it. I'm going to try to copy what I see, but I'm not going to be so wed to it that it has to be exactly right. Because it's not settling for good enough. It's more of, I like what I see, even if it's not exactly the same. So am I am I distinguishing the two enough in saying that?
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's really, when you look at your work, if the first thing you see are mistakes, then obviously that's just not working. Like, and usually mistakes, whether you're conscious of it or not, it's usually because there's a discrepancy in the light, in the proportions, in the contrasts, on the bigger concepts. Not necessarily is it exactly this shell, but does it work on the way forms meet light? If that light feels like it's hitting the wrong section, if this isn't blocking light the right way, or if this is turning the wrong way, like if this shell started turning to shadow here, it's like, that wouldn't make any sense. If it had a harder edge dark, then it would be cast shadow from the basket. But why would the basket be casting a shadow that way? And even if you couldn't articulate that, there'd be a funniness to it that would probably read as just not working, even if somebody weren't giving it the kind of analysis that I'd be giving it. There'd just be that funniness. And that's usually all you get in a gallery. Like, they're going from painting to painting. They form their opinion in the first, like, 3 or 4 seconds. And that's their opinion as they delve into it further, or they just walk away to the next painting. I mean, that seems a little harsh, but I think it's pretty true. And it's even true for me going through a gallery. It's like, that first impression really informs my opinion of it, no matter what the details do. And almost all of those are right there on the way light wraps around stuff consistently, that perspective, that anatomy, you know. So this is starting to differentiate from the shell behind it. It's starting to get that sort of spikiness. What I could do at this stage is just further this idea of getting rid of the outlines by mixing a green background. So I'm going to go ahead and do that just to finish the job of trimming that edge. And I'm pretty sure this is going to be too bright, but I just put a dot there and I was like, oh, that's too bright. So darker. I can also say, is it too green? Which means more umber than green. Okay, that's a little closer, but I feel like it's still too colorful and a little bit too bright. So I'm going to add a little umber and a little bit of black to that. And I bet it's going to be really close now. Perfect. So now I can trim the outline away. I don't really need a soft edge here because this is like an instant plane change. Ooh, I have a little... there's a little texture bump on the canvas right there. Maybe something got embedded in it. So I want to get rid of that, but I'll do that when it's dry. So now I can get rid of my outlines. I can further trim some of these edges. I didn't want to do it too soon because I really didn't know if this spike were working yet with the other shapes around it. But now I'm pretty confident. So I'm going to trim some of these outlines. If it has a tiny outline, that might be really neat. But I want it to be consistent. So I'd rather get rid of the outline on this sitting. And if I want one of those subtle outlines, I'll just take a mental note of how it looks here, and then I'll add that intentionally at the very end. That way, it's not like this more distant shell is outlined, but these more proximate shells aren't, and that doesn't make any sense. So, and then I can further this little drawing correction here. That was one of the more substantial drawing corrections, which I think, you know, if that's the bulk of the drawing corrections, it's going pretty well.
What's the size of this painting?
It's a surprising size. I looked through the frame shop and I found a frame and I was like, hey, I'm going to use that frame. And I assumed it was like 24, 28 or 26 or something. I don't know. It's surprisingly small. It's only 2022.
Really? It looks big.
It looks a lot bigger than that. I was really surprised by that. So I have the frame right behind me. It's, yeah. Which is, I mean, I cut this to fit that frame. You'd think I would know the size. But yeah, I assumed it was a lot bigger than 2022.
So did you put your painting in the frame yet?
Yeah, we can do that again before I'm done.
Okay.
Didn't I try it on the last sitting? Didn't you see that?
You were going to, but I don't know if you did.
I think I did.
Yeah, I remember that you were talking about getting a more flat frame.
Yeah, I have the
Maybe I
flat
missed
frame.
that one.
Well, that was part of that dialogue of just saying that, you know, it didn't really matter that that handle was up there because I will have a flat frame. I have the frame behind me. If I finish this, well, what I should do anyway is take a small break because it's time to get back from my work. So how about I just grab it and put it on there?
That sounds great.
Yeah. So up close, those outlines are more substantial than when I step back here, but this is the more authentic view. So, I mean, if it's coming together, even with a small outline, that's fine. So I like how it's going. I am being a little nitpicky, and it's way too early to be nitpicky, but it's not like nitpicky is going in a wrong direction. It's just moving very slow, and I'd rather have everything more integrated. So like I said, I'm critiquing myself of saying is like, look, you know, you're not following the pace that you want to go right now. Not that it's wrong, but it's just not my preferred way. So barely, I mean, this light is very raking right now. So it's casting more shadow than it will in a gallery. But
It looks good.
yeah.
That's a really pretty frame too.
But it looks pretty big though. I mean, I'm surprised it's only 2022. Anyway,
Yeah, it looks big.
it's got a ton of dust on
This
it.
one's big.
I'm making a big mistake here. I need to clean this. If I was going to do that again when it's wet paint, I really got to clean this frame. It's got a lot of dust. But I think I got away with it. Anyway, so I'm stepping back. The outlines are not as big of a problem as I thought they were. I mean, I can see it on the screen, and I'm looking straight ahead. Mostic.
Any outline line.
Yeah, they're pretty faint.
Yeah, I can't see them at all.
I mean, they're obvious here, but I'm the only one here.
Right.
I mean, like, how many? What? A foot and a half away, 2 feet. The other thing I can do that's kind of fun is just subtly turning all the top facing things with that background that I mixed. I can work that into the values. It's not much of a consideration, but I don't know, every little bit helps. All right. I want to complete these ideas. Really moving slower than I thought I would today. I'm gonna work this back line here. So going specific right here will mean that I have to draw the basket weave behind it. So what's gonna probably end up happening is I'll lose these edges. That, or I'd have to be so careful and not paint over them. And I don't know, you have to paint a little tighter than I like to go to do that. Not the end of the world. But so I might not take this back shape quite as far as I took that like ripple ridge here, which I have to do more work, but I'm intentionally taking a break from it and going back to it. I I find that if I work in any one area for too long, it gets a little out of proportion to some of the other things. And sometimes you just need a break from it anyway. And that's what I'm doing. So I'm working on this little spike. Then I can go back to that, or I can move over to here and then get back to it later. So this white I have is super thick. Be great for impastos, but I'm not ready for impastos yet. I might have to thin it down a little bit.
What kind of white is it?
It is titanium, but it's rather old, and it's gotten thicker, like really thick, like pasty thick. And so it has that high pigment strength, and it's thick. So it's like, I don't know, little hard to control. I'm not saying that to complain. Just saying I might have to.
Strongest white?
Titanium's like the highest pigment strength. Yeah.
Okay.
Which is one thing I don't like about it. For people who paint really thin, that's a great trait to have. For me, you know, the more white you have to add, the more it kills the color. And I'd rather have some thick paint and texture to define at least the areas that I want to feel like it's stronger, like it's coming forward, more proximate, things like that. And so I'll use thick paint for those areas, but it just caps the amount of white you can use when the pigment strength is high. So something relatively weaker like flake white is not only a little bit warm, so it has its, I don't know, maybe just a little bit more richness to it. And further, it's a little weaker, so you can get thicker globs of paint without it dominating the color. And that it's the tiniest bit different, but I feel like it's worth it. So I do paint with titanium, but I prefer Kremnitz white, the pure white lead. And did I ever share that Group A book with you? I usually talk about it in the color theory. Did you ever do color theory?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
you probably heard about Group A. In his book, he says the best white to use is zinc. Well, that's the same argument that I'm making with flake, that the zinc white is really weak, so you can build thicker impastos using more white.
Right.
Because it doesn't dominate the color as much. The problem is zinc is brittle. And so you could really have your painting look pretty bad in, 10 years, maybe longer. I displayed some artwork with some paintings of Emile Groupe's. Man, I think he's been dead for a long time, but this place also sold antiquities. So
So is it the book that says blue and yellow don't make green?
no, that's Wilcox. Group A is on color. That I do the color theory with two books, and it's Wilcox and Group A.
Okay.
It's basically the same demo same lesson that Andy gave me a long time ago, using the same two books. I might present it slightly different, but same gist. But it's same two books. And what happened is that students started looking up Group A's book, and telling me that it's terribly expensive because it's out of print. Like they stopped printing it a long time ago. So I have that chapter scanned, and I share that chapter that talks about eye fatigue. It talks about how to use warm and cool colors. Talks about color theory. It's a nice little chapter. It's well explained, and I love his artwork. There's two kind of famous students of Charles Hawthorne. He was considered like the father of American color theory. And the more famous of the two well-known pupils was Henshey, Henry Henshey. And so like Henshey was highly influential in like Nelson Shanks. So a lot of the color use at Studio Incaminati is informed by Henshey through Shanks, and Shanks is gone now, but through his atelier. But I like Group A better. Group A to me is less. The paintings are less about the color, but more about how the color can enhance the painting. But it's still all about the painting. The paintings don't become strictly about the color. I don't know. It's kind of the same argument that I was giving. I was talking about Will saying, "Well, why don't you do more of those quick studies that everyone loves so much?" And he was saying that not only does the style pick you instead of you picking the style, but also too is he didn't want his paintings to be about the brushstrokes. He wanted them to be about the content of the painting. So, like, if he's trying to say something through the symbolism or through, like individual people in it or something like that, the viewer might stop just cold in their tracks and marvel at the brushstrokes and go no further into the painting. And he didn't want that. So I feel like that's the same deal with color theory. Like, you can take it to an extreme to where your paintings might be awesome, but they'll be all just about the color. And that might be exactly what you want. That's cool. That's just not what I want. I want it to be about the painting. My painting might not say anything brilliant, but I don't want it to be strictly about the color. I want the color to enhance the painting. It's just wherever the sort of main thrust of the painting goes. And I feel like that's Group A more so than it is Henshey. I'm getting a little wonky. I pay attention to all this stuff.
That's good.
All right, I'm still getting really nitpicky on this sitting. It's just, I don't know, it's just that kind of day, I guess. Okay, so instead of eliminating this outline, I've allowed the brush to get really thin paint. And now it's just kind of mixing on the painting itself. Again, that takes a lot of feel. And so I'm not actively eliminating the outline. I'm just making it grayer and lighter. And if I lose it, fine, I'll just redraw it. But I'm getting rid of the outline. Might even want to put it back a little bit. There's some darker darks in there. Yeah, that helped. So this won't be the last sitting on this shell, but I think it's coming along pretty well. I think it's getting the major forms that will help me with the next sitting. I still would rather move on to that next spot. So I just kind of keep telling myself until I actually do it. Again, this has been kind of one of those nitpicky days.
I'll be signing off soon because I can.
Well, thanks for joining.
It was wonderful to see the painting. It looks beautiful.
Thank you. Here, let me just do one thing and then you sign off. Ready?
All right.
Ready? Let's put a tiny bit of warmth in there. And now you'll see how this starts to take on that extra strength of thicker paint. I just couldn't wait to get to this spot. There you go. Well, thanks for joining. And I'll see you tomorrow, right?
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Bye, Malika. Bye. Bye, Liz.
Bye.
Hey. Now I'm really glad I worked on this one. Well, I guess if I'm in a nitpicky mood, this is the right shell for that because it's intricate. But I got this in. I did a second sitting on this. I got another sitting on this, even though I was able to keep fairly simple on that. If I were to work on the basket weave, I would want probably a dedicated sitting to that anyway. So all of that's good.
I think you did a lot tonight. I'm so happy to see what you did.
But I can't believe I'm at 2.5 hours. I didn't get to at least these 3 shells. I already told Lu Jing, I said, I really doubt I'll get to the lace. But I thought there was a chance I could get to the basket.
That's okay. I think it's fine because, we get to watch it without it being rushed,
Yeah. Yeah, well, I definitely don't want to rush it. I want this to be the pace that it needs. And maybe another artist would spend longer and another artist would spend shorter. It's kind of like a personal feel. I would even say that if I painted it a second time, it might go at a different pace or a different strategy. So that's not even true from just me, but almost certainly true between different artists. And it's not like one would be right and one would be wrong. It's just, we're all going to paint the way that we need to paint for the way we paint. But again, I'm just kind of surprised that I've been mired in small shapes when this could have been a simpler sitting, but I guess it's just the way it goes. So I haven't done anything wrong. It's just surprising.
Yeah, I actually like you doing all these details.
Me too.
Well, I wouldn't even call this detailed yet. This is more of a setup because there's individual little stripes that go across.
Okay, I see.
Some of these little ripples have to work out a little bit more. I'm not going super specific in the values. I am kind of keeping it about 5 values, but these are intricate 5 values. They're just like these little tiny ridges and shadows and reflected lights. They're very small shapes. And it's not like I got to get them all right.
Now you have a very good base to work on in the future, right?
Yeah.
All the edges and the big shapes of light and shadows.
Yeah, I'm very encouraged by the start. I think it's going to turn out fine.
I like it a lot.
Especially with all the detail paintings I've done in the past with, lace tablecloths and shells and things like that. It's like this stage in the past has felt like, like, how am I going to pull this off? I know exactly where I'm going here. It's just taking me a long time. And again, the painting takes what it takes. I'm happy to share my thoughts and, my insights according to other paintings like this that had a lot of intricacy. But yeah, it's going well. I mean, this shell, the last time I painted it, I painted it once before for that painting called the Shell Collection. But it was more prominent in that other one. But yeah, that took for a long time. It took a very long time. So I feel like this is even going faster than before. I just expected this sitting to be a little blockier. Don't like how that far ridge is tangent to this one. So I'm going to do a drawing fix there. I could eliminate it because nobody would really expect it. It's the correspondence to this one. So there's another one of these that's barely poking out back there. I feel like this shape would be more convincing as the outside shape against the background than making this bigger and clouding the edge. So I'm going to do more cutting than adding. And so I'm going to mix up some background. Again, that little dot tells me if I need to go lighter or darker. And maybe this belongs, maybe not, but this is the more compelling edge to me. So I'm going to mostly eliminate that little spike. Maybe I'll just move it over a tiny bit, but I also don't want it tangent to the basket. So I just don't know if the viewer would expect this spike and how necessary is it. So I'm gonna bring it over. Now that edge looks better. I think it would look even better if I just completely eliminate it. So I'm going to do that for now. I don't think we'll miss it. I already don't miss it. So another round of just a little bit of creative decision making, and I did not have that on my radar at the beginning of the sitting. The painting told me that wasn't working. In its little painting language. Anyone listening thinks I'm cuckoo. He talks to paintings. All right, back to the spike. Again, I take these little diversions from what I'm working on quite on purpose because I'd rather have more things developed than one perfect spot developed. For one, and for two, I just need a mental break from time to time. So I don't have a mental break. So this was just a little diversion. It moves the painting in the right direction. I get my fresh eye for going back to this. Back to the show. So what's neat about this composition, it has a lot of different things going on. So the lace is a more subtle, more regimented texture. This is a more chaotic and just really spiky, intricate texture. This is, little flat lines that are sort of connected by these horizontals. This has the iridescence. This is a little less so, but this shell is gonna be really neat because it's got this projection of light coming through the basket. So it's like this checkerboard of light that goes through here. That's gonna be really neat. I think the painting is gonna be pretty cool by the time I finish. I might not record everything. Well, maybe I'll record it and speed it up, but I'm probably not going to go live for like every little tiny hatch. But I'll record it and speed it up. But yeah, that would be tedious. It takes hours. I'd probably drive everybody crazy. Just referencing back to all the other laces that I've done, including the one I did as a live contest and the one that I did as a live demonstration online. Those had to be more direct. But this one, I'm going to take my time with. One for the contest. that was a big swath of lace tablecloth too. And that was a pretty crazy thing to do. Yeah, so Lu Jing, we're both painting baskets, but this basket has a completely different structure than the one that you're working on.
Yeah, I think the one I work on has more space of the background coming through the basket.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so that's why I did a little bit pattern early on. I think that helps me to get a better sense.
Yeah. But it's not necessarily true that one basket is necessarily the answer for the other. But when you can kind of figure out that it has an anatomy to it, yours might be different. Like I have a Nantucket basket up here. That thing is a completely different structure than this. I have one that's pretty wild. That's like a bunch of, it looks like twigs right out of a tree. It's radically different from this one too. But I mean, I guess there's some universal principles that connect them a little bit, but you wouldn't treat it as a formula for sure. But I'll definitely make sure that you're contacted when I'm ready to do that big draw in. And the last basket I did, I left it a little on the loose side, but I could maybe, I wonder if I still have that video. If I still have that video, I can share it with you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that one has some bigger shapes that lets the background come through, right? You also have the shadow cast by those structure.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I remember that one.
But again, you're just kind of figuring out how does it work and what does the light do to it. And if you can answer those questions, you don't have to go weave by weave. You don't have to get every tiny little detail.
Yeah,
It just has to work for the viewer. And I never like to take for granted the viewers. They can pick up on patterns. They may not be able to articulate what's going wrong. It's just that if the pattern doesn't work, they'll look at it and it's like, well, I don't know. That's funny. So I don't know. I like to try to just figure out, well, what makes it work and how does the light wrap around it? And then I do my own thing.
For this particular painting, are you going to keep the table line at the back?
It's mostly obscured, and this does differentiate from the back pretty big time in that it's lace here, and that's the end of the table. I don't have to. I could obscure it, and what else I could do is I might make it pretty low impact by just saying that it's somewhere near the wall, and this is reflecting light into the wall. So that's kind of hinted at right here, and I might do that here too.
Okay.
What I don't want to lose is the contrast of these little spiky projections against the background. So if I did more of a haze back there, I'd want it to end short of that spike.
I see. Yeah, sounds good.
And that's less to do with what I'm actually seeing and more of like the creative direction I want to go. And sometimes, just like I was talking about with that spike up there, is like, yeah, you might think it works until it doesn't, and then you change your mind. And I want to be receptive to that. I want to keep that in mind as I go. I don't want to be so rigid in my plan that I don't miss an opportunity or miss something that just isn't working. Kind of the same discussion. Wow, this paint is so thick. This white is crazy thick. If I had more black oil, that's the other thing I need, Liz. Can you remind me? Sap green and black oil. Did we lose Liz? Maybe. That doesn't work. So let's see. We're almost at 3 hours. I'm going to try to complete this in that second tier block-in and then get to this one. I'm going to ignore those for today.
Okay.
I'm definitely not going to get to the basket. Oh, Liz, you're there.
Yeah, I am.
Okay. I just asked you to help me with something. I didn't hear you. So I asked you to remind me about sap green,
Right.
but also black oil. I need a refill.
Black oil? Okay.
Yeah, so let me say matter-of-factly that it's my responsibility. It's not your fault if I forget. But if we have 2 brains on it, it's more likely to happen. So if you don't mind reminding me, that would really help.
Yeah, I'll do my best to remember.
Yeah, but again, it's not your responsibility. It's mine. But I appreciate the help.
And then the other thing, maybe tomorrow or whenever it is that you can, is about sending out an email.
Oh yeah, for I might even do that tonight, even if it comes at the expense of sleep. Well, yeah, it's pretty important. It's making sure that people between interested and semi-interested are aware that the semester starts.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's true. Is it tomorrow already? Oh, my God.
The semester starts on Monday.
Okay.
So the more days with that message out there, the better.
Right.
So this is definitely not a candidate for blending. This stuff could be, but not the spike.
No, I agree.
I would lose too much with that. But then, again, it went slower than I wanted to, but I'd say it's a successful sitting.
That's definitely. Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, my gosh. So it's almost midnight.
Yeah. So I was just telling Li Jing, well, you were there. I didn't think you were there for a bit. Yeah, I just want to complete out this little thought right here and soften these edges. And then it'll probably be it for the sitting.
Okay.
Like I said, this was looking warm for a while until that got warmer and that got warmer. I got a lot warmer in these shadows too, just with reflected light. And so when I go in to eliminate those lines, I'm gonna probably warm it up a little bit, make it a little browner. That'll round out the sitting, and these little edges in here, either I want to be really specific with them or really general. I don't want to be stuck in between. So I might just put them in sorta and then eliminate them with a blending brush, even though they're kind of in the same boat as this. This is more worked out than that. So that's the distinction. It's going to be based on what I'm trying to preserve and not. I don't feel like I spent enough time on here making sure these little wrinkles, these little ripples make sense. And it's not anything I couldn't fix on the next sitting. It's just, well, why create extra work for myself? So I'm going to err on the side of simple here. Just want to get rid of some of these outlines. And part of that is going to be shell, and part of that's going to be background. Too dark. Too brown. Yeah, if I had more Blackwell, I would just go ahead and thin this white, but I'm here at the end of the sitting. Probably something I should have done in the beginning. White is just like, it's a thick paste. It's a little tricky to use. All right. This value right here really isn't working yet. I don't think I can get any brighter, so I might have to go darker with the background. But that totally negates the idea I was talking about with Li Jing about the table line in the back. I really like how my grandmother treated backgrounds. It was bare minimum. They like barely existed. And I'd like the same for my painting, but I don't want to go any brighter than this for reflected light, because I can't go much brighter for my lights. They're already pretty bright. So I don't know. That's going to help me with my decision on the background. And I went on that long diatribe about the background before to say that they're not unimportant areas. Backgrounds can be really supportive or really harmful to your paintings.
Yeah.
So I don't want to take that lightly. And as I develop the shell, I get a better picture of how to best support the shell. It's not going to be, the shell reacting to the background. It's going to be the background reacting to the shell. And just because I had that idea that I was going to go brighter with a reflected light coming off the tablecloth, I might have to change my mind in how dark I have to go for that reflected light there, because I feel like that's really important. But if I surround it by light, it's gone. And so, again, it's not a bad problem to solve. It's just, I just wanted to put it out there. I just wanted to talk about it. Again, I like these little, I don't know, just little paint and chat moments to kind of flush out my ideas. We wouldn't even have to, this would be rewarding even if we didn't talk about art at all. If we just talked about, cat videos or whatever. I don't know. Maybe not politics, because what a terrible thing for people to talk about. But but it wouldn't have to be about art. But still, happy to elucidate my ideas behind why I'm making the decisions I'm making and the pace that I'm going in.
Yeah, I was telling your mom today that, we have to do a caryatid for John's class. And she had me start work on a relief.
What's a caryatid?
It's kind of one of those statues that's holding something up, but it's built into the architecture.
Oh, yeah, we have those.
Yeah, or it could be standalone also. Like the Shell Girl, I guess, is a caryatid kind of, because she's holding that shell, I guess.
Okay. Well, if you look at the entrance to the 7 East Lafayette door,
Yeah.
that was the first thing that popped in my mind when you said that it kind of holds up like an archway or something.
Yeah, it's more like that, but it's John wants us to make it up, I guess.
Make it up.
So it's not really a copy. You can reference stuff.
Yeah.
But he wants us to, I guess, create our own, you know.
Sure.
And I was just working on a relief to kind of get the feel for fabric, and it was really not that easy just to even start with that kind of a study.
I mean, I think making things up is incredibly hard. You have to know a lot to pull it off.
I mean,
ideally.
even if you're copying, you know, like for me, I was copying a relief, and it was difficult. And I just told her, I said, I don't think I'm ready to graduate.
Well, I mean, the graduation is mostly ceremonial, but everyone thinks of it as like the end. It doesn't have to be the end. And, you know, are we ever really truly graduated? I mean, I would just say I've got a lot to learn. You know,
I just feel like it went so fast. And while I have learned a lot, I still feel very deficient in a lot of areas. But thank goodness for the 5th year, because, you know, I could see where I need to work, you know?
well, I mean, I told you about John Sills. John Sills is one of the better landscape artists in the country, right?
Yeah.
But he didn't really start pulling it together till his 4th year, 5th year. He talks about that openly. Like he'll pull out the old work and just say, "Look, you know, I was really, really struggling," and then it just kind of clicked. So you're definitely getting it. For one, you're not going to see the progress like we are, like the teachers, because your judgment of your work is going to be kind of influenced by the frustration.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it, Hans.
Yeah, I'm not. Well, I'm also not going to say that you're beating yourself up. I'm just saying, like, you know, you're living in the struggle of getting these effects onto the board, but we can take a more bird's eye view and say, well, this is what the paintings were looking like. These are the way that you're communicating and problem solving, right? And I mean, I can definitely see the progress, but you know, Schüler is the German word for student. You know, I feel like I've got a ton to learn. I always want to paint more efficiently. I want to paint more expressively. I want to paint, you know,
You're pretty awesome.
more boldly. I mean, there's a lot that I want to accomplish that I haven't quite gotten there yet, but it's a journey. It's not, you know, it's not something that I feel like I have to know by a certain time. It's something that's constantly developing.
Okay.
That's not fully developed, but I'm going to leave it for now because I'm getting a little past how long I wanted to spend tonight. So, like I said before, I'm going to take a very soft blending to that so that I can still kind of have this second tier of modeling, but not be influenced by any sort of detail. So that's going to be a little flatter right here. I'm going to do that quite on purpose. It already did its job of the shapes. And I can see another quick problem solved right here in that I really don't want this shadow to end short of right on that spike, even though I see it in the real painting or in the real setup. So I just artificially knocked it down. These have to be bright, and I just don't want to get the ribs, placed poorly. I think that's a really nice moment for drama, because especially against that background. So I'm gonna leave that. I'm gonna leave that kind of mushy. And then I'm gonna spend like 10 minutes on this shell, and then I'm gonna call it for the night.
Okay.
And wake up nice and early for the kids. I have to, because in order for me to be only like 10 minutes late, I've got to get them to school early. And it's hard to wrangle all the things that I need to get done to get them out the door. Like, I already made their lunches for tomorrow. But,
Wow.
Still getting them 100% ready and in the car and buckled is an adventure. So then I rush them to school, I drop them off, and then it's like this mad dash to get to the school. But it's like every road has its challenge. Like today, going in, there was a school bus, and I was just like, what the heck is a school bus doing on this route? It didn't make any sense. So I got around that. I mean, not around the bus, but it turned and I didn't. So you can't pass the school bus, but I didn't. But I got around that, but then I got onto Falls Road and I was behind like this farm tractor. It's just like, come on. So now I'm going like 20 miles an hour. And I somehow got there only like, I don't know, 10 minutes late, and it was just Karen. And then the class filled in after that. But yeah, I don't want to say just Karen. That sounded terrible. But Karen was the only student there.
I've been trying to get there early, and I've been having a tough time.
Yeah.
I mean, one day it was traffic, and today I don't know what happened to me.
Well, I mean, obviously you get the most out of the time if you're there at least on time, if not a little bit early to set up and stuff. But I mean, that never bothers me. It's like I definitely don't want to be late being the teacher. It's just really tough with the kids in the school year the way they are.
Well, I think that this late in the semester, we kind of are working on other things, and we can keep busy. There's stuff to do.
Yeah, it just doesn't bode well for a lesson.
Yeah.
So this is where I was going with that. Is I'll be probably about, I don't know, 15 minutes late, something like that. But if somebody wants to set up a still life setup for a paint along,
Okay.
we could do that. It's not a must. Everyone might have their projects to work on, but I'd be happy to. We could just paint on the same painting. We'll turn it into a lesson.
Okay. If I get there before you, I'll do it,
Sure.
and I'll try to get there early.
Like I said, that stuff never bothers me. I'll just teach you when you're here. It's none of my business to go around scolding people about being on time, especially when I can't be there on time. But that's never been the case for me anyway. It's a place for adults to learn it. So everyone's got busy schedules and tired and traffic and all that stuff. It's just that I'm not judging that at all. It's just I don't like being late for the class that I'm teaching. And we could really hit the ground running if something were at least loosely set up. And then, I could get a paint along going.
Okay.
Yeah, so this little block in, I like this shell a lot better already. And the only real mystery about this one is that there's a sparkly highlight on just this rim of the shell. So I want to get rid of my outline. I want to do a little edge work there to get rid of the outline. And I want to pop that highlight on. And then I'm going to call it for the night.
From where I'm looking now, it's hard for me to tell where the shell you're working on is separate from the one in front of it.
The urchin.
Yeah.
So what I see is that the urchin is brighter than this shell in this area, and then the shell is brighter than the urchin in this area.
Okay.
So from where I'm sitting, it's kind of doing that, and kind of is okay for right now. It needs more, and this just by being the last thing for the night is going to fall a little short of the other ones.
Okay, that's fine.
But maybe it's also true that it's not translating through the camera very well. Because maybe I'll pull it up to the camera screen and show you what I'm seeing.
Okay.
But also too is like again, we put it back in this context of I'd rather err on the side of ... right? So I'd rather err on the side of this shell being a little bit less bold, descriptive, a little bit more lost, because it's not as important as even the urchin in front of it. But I certainly don't want it competing with either of these two. It's just
now it looks a little better for me.
More of a supporting character. And it's missing elements. So this like bright highlight here is falling short of white. Again, because I don't want my brightest accent to be in background secondary characters.
I understand.
But I also don't feel like it's at a stage that everything has to be right yet. So I'm not really worried about that so much. If this is just a setup for this, then it'll still be the right direction.
Yeah, now I can tell that it is behind it.
No, I appreciate your feedback. Yeah, I'm just saying that two things can be true. Like for one, for one, really appreciate that you're saying it. It helps me consider it and react.
But also the camera could be doing something. But now it does look like they're two separate shows.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing. Is like it was missing the highlight, and the highlight helps it pop out. But this was part of your feedback right here. I made that darker so it could read against the urchin. I made the urchin darker so it could read against that value.
Yeah.
This got brighter, but I don't want it as bright as this, and I don't want it as warm as that. So it has to fit in this network that the first guess might not get me there. And like I said,
That's beautiful.
I not only had these other reasons why it wasn't working yet, but I also took your feedback and I thought, hey, look, that should differentiate from this urchin more. So it was a little bit of both. No, I appreciate it. Always like the feedback. So let's see. One last little touch. I'm going to get this little tiny rim. It's like an outline. I'm going to replace that dark outline with a light outline. And that's going to help just be one less thing that I have to consider on the next sitting. and it brings me one step closer to the finished product. So I'll have to trim that with the background. I already have the background mixed up though, because I worked on it on this side. All right. So then, just not worrying about everything being right, just thinking about one step closer. Again, it took an unexpected turn toward really small nitpicky shapes today. And I usually don't get nitpicky this early. So, I mean, in some respects, maybe it's a break of discipline, and in others, it's just, that's the way I'm painting today. And I'm okay with that. Some days, sometimes things do take longer to develop, and it totally makes sense for something this intricate to take a little long. It's just I normally don't mire myself into those tiny shapes this early in the process, but that, again, it's fine. Okay, so done.
Okay.
So let's bring this up to the camera and then truly be done. All right. Anybody that wants to leave can, but happy to talk while I put away brushes and stuff. It's just, let's see, that's so dark. All right, so that intricate shell is drawn a little bit more. Geez, I can't put light on it. There we go. The urchin got darker and has more turning form. The iridescent shell, I think, has a lot of potential. The highlights are too pale. I really like the pattern of blues and greens and pinks. And so that'll get, I think, really nice in the next sitting.
Are you going to glaze the next sitting, I guess?
The answer is almost always going to be yes.
I mean, for the iridescent shell, I mean.
Yeah. So I already keyed this up a little bit bright and a little bit pale. So I'm going to glaze some of those pinks and greens into it.
It would be like a half paste then?
Or I'm gonna go for glaze on that, and then come back in on top of it. But
get the highlights back in, okay.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
So I don't know if that doesn't work. I can just wipe it out and do it again. And that's always a possibility that you just try something, it doesn't work. I know eventually I'll get the shell that I want, and I'm a little optimistic about how it looks on this stage as far as, oh my gosh, that's so dark. As far as the setup and just kind of thinking about what it'll look like when I can get a little bit of greens and pinks into those lights. In fact, you know what? Before the end of the sitting, I'm going to go ahead and put pure white in the brightest of these highlights. Because they'll be a little bit too bright until I glaze, and then they'll be darker. They'll be darker and more colorful. So they were working, but if I put them in and glaze over it and it gets too dark, then I'll be coming back in with that pale paint, and maybe this is a better strategy. So I'm gonna key up to pure white. That's too much contrast. It's way too bright. It's way too washed out. I want color there. But again, it's just that little bit of a guess as to what it's going to look like when I can get that glaze on top. All right, so that's, I'm going to go a little bit too bright here too. I don't have to get it right on the second try either. Or third or fourth or whatever. I don't want to put that kind of pressure. So what'll end up happening is if the glaze works, great. If it doesn't, I'll problem solve for the next round. And if that works, great. And if not, I'll problem solve for the next round. But the problem solving, I mean, there's no absolute right. I need to step back from the painting and really love it. So I think it has a lot of potential for that. Whether it's exactly this shell or not, I don't really want to get too lost into that. I just want it to be, you know, dramatic and colorful, not out of harmony to the rest of the light. And I think it's going to check all those boxes. All right. Well, I'm going to put away some paint.
Yeah, that looks great.
Thanks.
I'm gonna sign off, okay?
Okay.
Hi, Liz.
Bye.
Bye, Liz. See you tomorrow.
Okay.
And I have to find a clean tile for my paint for tomorrow. Because
What are you going to teach tomorrow?
we do still life in the morning and then portrait in the afternoon.
Oh, that's cool.
But what I was suggesting to Liz is if she can get there before I can, again, I have to be there a little bit late. But if somebody sets up a still life, we'll just hit the ground running. I'll just have this paint ready and
That is
really just go right into a painting. Probably a pretty aggressive one. Maybe even better if I can get even a camera on that. I'll do a little video. I've been enjoying doing those.
Is that going to be like a paint along?
Yeah.
I see that. That's always cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I like paint-alongs. You have to go, for me, I have to go, I mean, Andy too, I know. We have to go just a little slower and we have to stop to check on everybody.
Well, Andy goes really fast. Once I was in his class, and yeah, he went really fast.
Yeah, he's pretty inconsiderate.
Yeah. Sometimes it's good that I try my best to catch up, and sometimes things turn out to be much better than what I expect.
But you know what I find,
It's not always the case.
all joking about my brother aside, but what I find with him with the paint-alongs, because I've done a lot with him too, and I've observed him doing the paint-alongs a lot too, is that he goes a lot slower than anybody else in the beginning and then gets to the finished product a lot faster, right?
Okay.
Because those beginning things are just kind of taking notes, seeing where it's going, and then you'll see people just way beyond him as far as like having everything kind of scribbled in. But he's going slower than they are. And then, boom, his painting is done, and then everybody's way behind. I've seen it so many times.
Yeah, I think Andy is really fast when he starts to put down colors.
Yeah.
At that stage, it's just went like crazy. So every brush stroke he put down is like almost exactly the way he wanted to be. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you take little adaptations as you go. Like if you see a color down, it has a value to it, and then if you make the next one make that brushstroke work, so it's not like it necessarily worked. It's just that you're building the context around it. At least until you get to a conflict, and you're just like, okay, well now this relationship doesn't work, and then it's a quick problem solve, to make it work. I mean, some are more quick than others, of course, but.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that he actually doesn't care so much about whether we can catch up.
I care about that stuff.
Yeah, I know.
But see, my system has really natural stopping points too. So when I get that sort of gestural outlining done, it's good for me to step back from my work. Not only just to get around the room and help students, but I mean, that's just a natural time to stop and get a fresh eye.
Yeah, I think either way works. So originally I thought in Andy's way I can never catch up, and then I feel somehow I still learn a lot gradually. So I think either way works fine for me.
Right. We'll see. Yeah, Andy's system is very direct. Mine is abstract drawing, abstract simplification, only what I see when I squint, and big blocky midtones, and then I break that down into 5 values. Each one has a step to stop and reflect and adjust and measure. And then, assuming that all those stages got approved, then I'm just adding small details. Right. The thing is about this shell in particular is that the block-in could only go so far. I mean, this is really intricate, these little tiny spikes and things like that. So yes, there's another round of detail that needs to be added to it, but I don't feel like this sitting probably could have been more simplified if I want these to be somewhat accurate. So the painting dictates it too. So like if Andy's setting up 3 fruits in a pot, 3 pears in a pot, I mean, we could, both of us could just really slam that in, but this is so intricate that it's maybe a little different.
Yeah, I think it's very helpful to see how you develop the detail structure like relatively early on, and then maybe next sitting you start to build more details on top of this.
Yeah, this will definitely get more details, but I don't think it'll take priority over building these shells up, the basket, and the foundation of the cloth. Right, so I'll get back to that probably after I develop this. This, I don't know how many sittings it's going to take. So I probably will do a little bit of work on this on the next sitting, but then I'm going to shift my focus to these kind of unresolved areas, drawing the weave on top, drawing the squint level shapes of the cloth. Again, I'm just going to use a translucent like gray. And like this has a leaf pattern here. It's got a flower going over the edge. And then it's got this network of little tiny, I don't know, like holes, right? So I'm going to ignore those. I'm just going to go for the bigger shapes. And then let that dry. And then it's going to be a tiny brush and just kind of weaving it together. And that takes forever. So I'll probably do the live stuff for all the shell and the basket and the block-in. I'll probably do a sitting to where I'm doing that little hatch work, but then I'll probably do a few sittings where I'm just building that up without going live, because that's just tedious. That's not exciting to watch. That's not exciting to do. It's just
but I think,
slow.
it's very helpful to see how you finish such a detailed painting. I've seen a lot of finished product from you, but I never have any sense of how much time and effort it actually takes.
Well, good. Well, happy to have you join me.
Yeah. So are you going to do this in the middle of the week always?
I mean, ideally I do them on Saturday nights, but I didn't do it on this one. I was just kind of spent, and I really debated it. I really should have it more consistent.
Yeah, I'll see if I find it on your Instagram, like when you post the time. I'll see if I can make it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have to work till very late, then I just cannot do it.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
of course.
I'll be happy to watch.
Yeah, I could also text you too.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, great. Well,
Yeah, good night.
good night.
See you on Saturday.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
No problem. Bye.
All right, bye. Okay. So, I'm gonna end Zoom. All right. Looks like I've got 3 people watching me on YouTube. Awesome. Thank you for joining me. Really happy to have you here. What I want to do real quick is maybe bring the camera to the painting, because like a lot of the colors and the iridescence of this shell are really not showing up. And so on the second sitting, these are all too pale, but I'm going to glaze more color into it. So I kind of like to have that kind of sub layer of greens and reds. And then it's going to be push-pull. So I'm going to be putting more in. This intricate shell is where I've spent most of my time today. It's not soft enough. It doesn't have enough details. If you look at the thing that I'm painting from, oh, that's so washed out. If you look at the thing I'm painting from, it's, I don't know how to get it not to be washed out. Here, I'll turn off. I have the dimmer. Maybe that'll help. Whoa, that's too dark. But you can see how it's got, it's still washed out. Man, it's so dark in here too. So that's just how much it wants to overexpose. All right, bad example. But anyway, it's got a lot of intricate details in it. This urchin, I'm going to glaze these color bands on it. I probably will wait before I put the little dots on. This one back here, I just want to make sure that it kind of is more of a background character. It's not going to be as developed. This has a lot of bright, still too washed out, bright shininess to it. So I was hoping to get to that today. I just didn't. So stay tuned for that. And then the lace tablecloth, it's going to have, you can watch my video of a different tablecloth where I kind of show how I approached this, but I wanted the background coming through because I'd rather superimpose the little weaves on top of the background and have it coming through the holes rather than adding the background over top. It'll just seem further back if I do it that way, especially if I use thicker paint for the weaves. And again, I only have to sell it on the first impression. I don't have to have every little weave. It doesn't have to have every little slash. It just has to have a system that makes sense. And there's extra little touches I can put in, like the thickness of the paint. And if it feels like it's a texture on top of this thin sort of background, that'll pull off the effect a tiny bit more. So hope you'll join me the next time. I will announce this as soon as I can. And, no matter what, you'll be able to see it on the live on my channel. So I hope you'll subscribe if you're not already. And eventually, this is going to get all dubbed together, all the sessions with kind of a comprehensive talk where I explain the whole process, go a little faster with it, and turn it more into a lesson rather than just kind of me rambling of what I'm thinking in the moment, which, can be helpful too. So anyway, super glad you joined me, and I'm going to sign off, and hope you'll stay tuned for the next one.